I'll call to order the council meeting for the Regional Municipality Appeal for Thursday, November the 9th. Roll call, all are present except Councillor Palashi, who's ill. Councillor Parrish indicated she'll be late. And Councillor Starr is absent, and Councillor Sato. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes for the October 26, 2017 Regional Council meeting. Moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Tovey, that the minutes of the October 26, 2017 Regional Council meeting be approved. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. That the agenda for the November 9th, 2017 Regional Council meeting include a communication from Marcus Turner, Director and Senior Investment Consultant, and Paul Timmons, Senior Consultant, Willis Towers Watson, regarding municipal governance and the prudent investment standard to be dealt with under Enterprise Programs and Services, item 12.6, and further that the agenda for the November 9th Regional Council meeting include a communication from Gary DeGorder, General Manager, Corporate Services, Town Clerk, Town of Caledon, regarding Metrolinx Commuter Go Rail to be dealt with under Public Works item 14.2, and further that the agenda for the November 9th, 2017 Regional Council meeting be approved as amended. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Our first delegation, we have representation from Metrolinx, and I was just going to suggest that pursuant to the procedure bylaw, as presiding officer, I'm moving that the time limit for this delegation be extended. I'm suggesting that 10 minutes would be more appropriate for the presentation, and this will require a recorded vote.
Oh.
That carries. So if the delegates would like to come forward, please, for Metrolinx. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here. I was here last to provide our support to the Peel Region Goods Movement Strategy, and it's a pleasure to be here again to take a bit of a broader view and talk about regional planning. I don't have to introduce Metrolinx to you. You're intimately familiar with our organization, its mandate, its mission. Following the adoption of the Big Move in 2008, we have seen over $30 billion in investment in the region with GO Regional Express Rail, for example, and Ontario LRT that you're all very familiar with. So we are now in the process of developing the next regional transportation plan. Last year, we released the discussion paper based on extensive consultation, research, and analysis. We conducted additional research and analysis in close collaboration with municipal staff at the regional and local level. And that culminated in September with the presentation of our draft plan to our board, which approved it for consultation. And since then, we have received a number of comments, deputations, and I'm making the rounds throughout the region to present the plan to various councils as well as the public. The plan is in draft, so we very much welcome your input, and we'll, of course, we're taking it very seriously to input into a draft final and ultimately a final plan. You will have noticed that the plan is somewhat silent on implementation. We felt that it was very important to agree on a consensus for a vision for 2041. And we know that we will need to proceed to an implementation phase, including prioritization, including a clear process to advance projects further. I mentioned engagement with municipal staff that was done through two distinct tables, the Municipal Planning Leaders Forum, which gathered a number of times, and this is composed of planning commissioners and heads of planning from throughout our region. The Municipal Technical Advisory Committee is a more technical table where a lot of iteration occurred around policies, but especially projects, modeling, forecasts, et cetera, et cetera. We also developed a residence reference panel. We did this by sending 10,000 letters throughout the region and ended up selecting 36 representative members of the population, 18 men, 18 women, among whom many residents of Peel region. We brought them together over 5 weekends. They learned about the system, they learned about challenges that our region is facing, and then they engaged in a conversation about what they would want to see from the plan. And that culminated in 7 recommendations that are forming the foundation of the draft. We have been meeting the public both digitally through our website, metrolinx.com/theplan. I'm told that we have over 500 pages of submissions already and thousands of responses to surveys, downloads of our plan, et cetera, et cetera. And we hosted a roundtable. The very first one actually was in Peel, in Mississauga, on October 5th, where we had a really great discussion with your residents about the plan and what they wanted to see. From the 2008 big move, we looked at the vision, goals, and objectives and made sure that it was still relevant. The feedback that we got is that it was a bit complicated and hard to remember, so we cleaned that up a bit, focusing on strong connections, the core of our mandate, the quality of the travel experiences with complete travel experiences, and of course the end goal, which is sustainable communities. Why we are all here and why we do what we do is to support a high quality of life, prosperous competitive economy, and a protected environment, which is captured in our vision. The draft plan contains 5 strategies, and I wish I could spend more time with you to go over each, but I don't. Strategy 1 is a recognition that even though much has been committed and much is under construction, we need to make sure that we build on this momentum, that we continue and complete the projects that we have started. A project is not relevant to the traveling public until they can see it, touch it, use it, and see their lives improve. Strategy 2 is a recognition that in order to meet our transportation and land use challenges over the next 25 years, we need to build more transportation projects, more transit in the region. Strategy 2 contains a number of proposals above and beyond projects that are currently in delivery or in development throughout the region. Strategy 3 is a recognition that it's not sufficient to build discrete transportation projects, that we need to work on the connective tissue, so transportation demand management, fare and service integration, the HOV network, the cycling network, and even Vision Zero to focus on the safety of our transportation system, which is should be an overarching principle for how we do things. Strategy 4 is a recognition that our plan is mandated by the province to help implement the growth plan. It recognizes the strong ties between transportation and land use and the need for the transportation plan to acknowledge and support the land use framework laid out in the growth plan. Growth plan was just updated by the province and offers a number of opportunities and improvements to focus development at GO stations, for example, and to reflect regional transportation planning in municipal transportation planning. Strategy 5 is preparing for an uncertain future. We have received a lot of feedback about the longevity of the plan, the flexibility of the plan, when there's so much we don't know. The arrival of autonomous vehicles, shared mobility, the ability to order transportation through apps, and of course, the need to adapt to a changing climate. There's a number of transit projects in Peel, and I'm not going to rattle them off, but I just want to highlight that the difference between in-delivery and in-development projects. In-delivery projects are projects that are fully funded, many of which are under construction. So you're very familiar with the Transitway. Ontario LRT is a fully committed project, and a number of RER projects as well. In-development projects are projects that do not have full funding commitment, but substantial support exists for these projects and substantial resources have been allocated by municipalities and the province to their development. So for example, Dundas West, BRT, Queen Street, BRT in Brampton, etc. As I said, under Strategy 2, there's a number of net new projects, proposed projects that will need to be prioritized and that will need to be staged for advancement through a set of formal stage gates. And so you have a number of LRT, BRT projects, and of course, a project that we know is a very significant priority for the region. I was just in Milton presenting to council there, so the 15-minute service on the Milton GO line. We also made it clear that, again, each project is not self-sufficient and that we need to organize these projects in a frequent rapid transit network. So it's a seamless network that is transparent, easy to use for customers with fare and service integration. We call it the rainbow network, so that customers do not have to care whether a bus is red or orange or green. They can just get on, and it takes them where you want to go. And we know that, for example, My Way and Brampton Transit have done an excellent job of that in the Euro-Ontario corridor, making sure that customers are not confused by who provides the service. We've introduced a new category of service called Priority Bus. It's very similar to BRT, but it offers a bit more flexibility for implementation. It doesn't demand, for example, that roads be widened for this service. I want to quickly outline that we've been working very closely with Peel Region staff on goods movement. As I said, I was here to support the work of the region, and we've used the work that Peel has done to promote greater attention to goods movement throughout the region. We continue to engage municipalities, MTO, and the private sector in goods movement, and promoting a regional goods movement network that would formalize priority on certain routes leading, for example, to freight clusters or intermodal terminals. I'm at the end of my time, but I just want to highlight that we're confident that the plan that is proposed will have meaningful impact with greater access to transit by millions of people and greater access to transit from millions of workplaces. And this is an access map that shows you how the area with excellent access to jobs is projected to expand over the next 25 years. And finally, we are civil servants, so we cannot be prescriptive or deterministic when it comes to governance matters or decision-making mechanisms, but we are putting the questions on the table, and that is in the draft. Do we have the right tables? Do we have the right forums? Do we have the right processes throughout the region to get us where we want to go in the next 25 years? And do we have the right funding tools, not just for capital, beyond what has been committed, beyond 2025 approximately, but also for the operation of the transit system. So again, the plan is on our website. We encourage everyone to come and make a submission, and we are headed towards our December board meeting with a new version of the plan. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I have a list of councillors that want to speak to you. Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, and I got to tell you, it's a very informative report, and to have a vision for Metrolinx, I think this is the best report that you can really start to see, to build in for the future. And it's really comforting to see. A couple of things. The first thing I would say is the goods movement. Thank you for recognizing the work that's been done here by our staff here at the Region Appeal. But the challenge is I'm grateful to hear what you're saying, because there's a lot of good work here, but it's going to fall on deaf ears if we don't start to figure out how it ties the surrounding part of the GTA, how it all ties together, because goods just don't stay in Peel, they move out and move through. So we need everybody to the table to start to build on that format that's already been created. And I want to thank you for embracing that and making that a mandate to get out through the GTA and down to the Hamilton area. So I appreciate that. Secondly, and I'm not going to step on Councillor Grove's thunder here, but she's got a motion coming forward concerning the Bolton Go. Bolton is going to take a considerable amount of growth in the next 25 to 35 years. The challenge is 2041, and we really need it 2031. In order for us to meet the intensification targets that's expected of us, we definitely need it. But here's the second part. Again, where I'm saying is stepping out of our boundaries is there's Vaughan that needs to build on the west side of Highway 400, which is that rail line is integral for them. The only place we can park those trains is Bolton. Those areas where they have their stops are all built out. So it's how we all work together, and, you know, it's going to take collaboration of other municipalities along with York Region as well as Peel. But I'm just saying these are some of the challenges. But I'm going to let Councillor Gross speak a little bit more about the motion itself. But I'm trying to give the background is no matter what decision we make here in Peel, it also affects the surrounding municipalities. And I got to tell you, this is the most comforting thing I've seen out of Metrolinx. Where you're going is you're starting to look at that holistic picture, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Antoine, I could actually just sit here and beat you up all day, but I won't. So my question is, so I've been beating this drum actually for years and years when Gary McNeil would come here and sit in that chair. In 2008, you identified, Metrolinx identified Bolton as in sort of the short or medium term. In your new report after the big move, it's not in there. So can you tell me why?
Thanks for your question. We understand the importance of improving transit to Caledon and linking Caledon to the rest of the region. We have done extensive work to look at the future of transit for the next 25 years, but I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but the way we plan is that we identify activities that are really crucial to happen over the next 10 years, because this is the lifespan of the plan. So there was a plan in 2008, there's a plan now, and putting everything into our models, looking at the forecasts, trying to anticipate where population will be allocated. The population allocation, population and job allocation has not been finalized at the lower tier level yet from the flowing from the province. At this time, we have concluded that rail service to Bolton could not be justified. But we very much understand your interest and your concerns, and will, as I said, we will take this into consideration for future versions of the plan. So we understand a letter has been is being sent. If you have any additional evidence or facts that can be brought to the table, we welcome that, as well as discussions with municipal staff, of course.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you to consider is not just looking at the growth that will be occurring in the Bolton area only, but really to look at the catchment areas. So when you're building hospitals, one of the things that they use is they look at the catchment areas and how many people it would serve. So if you look at Bolton and all the catchment areas within that surrounds Bolton, you'd find that there's a large population number there that probably would move us a little closer rather than taking us off your radar. So is that something that you would consider doing, or have you looked at that, or did you look at that?
So models are not perfect. But they do, so the foundation of a model is where population and jobs are going to be located, so it's an assumption. We also make assumptions about where people may want to go, car ownership, et cetera, and then we press play, and then we see, it's a bit like SimCity, and then we see people move and take advantage of the services that exist. So to the extent that, there would be parking at a GO station, we anticipate that people can come from fairly far to access the services. So it does contemplate that people will not just walk from the surroundings of the station, but that there's a fairly large catchment area, especially at the end of the lines where we're very familiar with people, for example, driving long distances to Aldershot or Barrie, et cetera, et cetera.
And I didn't see any financials in here in your presentation, so I wonder if you don't have to do this now if you don't have the information, but I'd like to know what the cost would be because we do have the tracks. We've got tracks running through Bolton. Now, you probably have to twin a track or whatever you do over there, but is it possible to get some costing on what it would cost to do that in order?
So thank you for your question again. I asked my colleagues the same question yesterday because I anticipated this might come up. We do have high-level cost estimates at this point, but in order to bring a corridor to standards so that trains don't derail and they arrive on time, et cetera, and stations are built, it's a little bit like anticipating that your bathroom renovation will cost $20,000 until you bring the people in and then it's 50, right? So it's always surprising how much things can cost, and I understand that the high level estimate is quite high, but I don't have the figure with me.
Okay, so maybe that's something that you can provide to me after. Okay, that would be great. The other thing that I just wanted to ask you, if you would consider, and I hear this from my residents quite often, and you did do this for us many years ago with increasing the GO bus service. So you did do a feasibility study a number of years ago and identified that there was justification for increasing the GO bus service. So is that something that you can take away and have a look at it again and see if you can add on some additional?
Absolutely. For people who do take GO buses, we're very proud of our GO bus service. And we actually do have contemplated bus improvement in the plan for Bolton, part of our new regional express bus concept, which leverages an expanded network of high occupancy vehicle lanes to make the service much more reliable and of course faster. So Bolton is in the plan when it comes to a regional express bus service.
Thank you. And would you mind sending me some information on that as well, so this way I can provide it to my residents? And finally, Mr. Chair, I want to just thank you for recognizing the need to reduce the GHG. We did have Dr. Sachs here a couple of weeks ago who spoke about climate change and the need to reduce GHG. So hopefully you will move us up on your radar and put us there, because one of the things that my community struggles with is all the trucks along Highway 50. It is a difficult road to travel, and my residents who are leaving to go to work heading south, it's difficult for them in the mornings and coming home and dealing with that. And I know that the city of Brampton, they've got a whole bunch of lands along the Highway 50 corridor just south of Mayfield Road. And I think, and Brampton can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's where they're looking at putting in a lot more industrial lands there. So anyway, and that's part and parcel of reducing the GHG. So I'm at your mercy, asking for some consideration that you move us back into somewhere before 2041. And Mr. Chair, when you do bring the report forward, I'm happy to move the recommendation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Crombie.
I want to thank you for your presentation and thank you for the cooperation of working with Metrolinx. We had the opportunity to meet with Phil Verster earlier this week. It was a very productive meeting, very knowledgeable guy with a rail background, very impressive actually. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing, working with Council of Mississauga, Light Rail Transit, breaking ground next year, the Transitway, the Dundas Street Corridor. My ask, and I see Councillor Sato's on the board, I'm sure it'll be similar, all-day two-way GO train service on the Milton line. You've got 15-minute service from Milton to Union. That's not the way people need to travel. We're a net importer of jobs. People need to come to work in Mississauga. We need that train to come from Milton, from Union, through Mississauga to Milton and beyond. And we need it all day, and we need it both ways. So what's the timeline for that commitment?
Thank you so much for your question. And the Milton Council echoed these sentiments. And I want to clarify that our aspiration in the plan is to have 15-minute all-day service on the Milton corridor. We do understand how important this corridor is as a spine in Mississauga.
That's right.
And as a downtown resident, it would improve prospects for the people that I know to be able to access a very large number of jobs in Mississauga. However, you know...
500,000 of them.
Exactly. You know that CP owns the corridor.
I do.
And it's a crucial east-west corridor for CP. So,
We need to take the freight off that corridor and open it up for commuter traffic.
and discussions continue. We also acknowledge the need to look at passenger traffic and freight traffic in a way that is much more regional in nature. So working with the federal government, MTO, all municipalities to take a step back and look at how passenger and freight can cohabitate in the region so that we continue supporting freight. So we know that Peel is very interested in goods movement, so we need to continue supporting that, but also respond to that priority that we know is pressing in Mississauga, but beyond, of course.
You're telling me there's no timeline.
The timeline is really controlled by the pace of the dialogue with CP, which is a private company under federal jurisdiction.
Okay, well, I'll leave it there. I just wanted to make the point, and I see Councillor Sato's on the board, and she may echo my sentiments. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the presentation. I wasn't going to ask about all-way two-way GO service, but also in Brampton, and I guess the answer would be very similar in terms of timelines. That, I guess, being CP a private company and et cetera.
So thanks for your question again. The dynamic is a bit different on the Kitchener corridor. And we do have a plan to quite substantially improve service first to Mount Pleasant and then going to Bramalea and Mount Pleasant. And so there's a plan. It's contingent on quite a lot of construction, but I understand that an agreement was signed and that we're looking at about 7 years. But it's looking like we're a little ahead on that corridor.
And through the chair, what I want to, in terms of, when I read your draft documents, and it's one of the, things that you said, you talked about each route being reliant on each other. So, for example, in Brampton, we made some changes and we're looking at alternative routes. Is that going to be incorporated, aligned, I guess, with the overall plan, and how does it impact the overall regional plan? And certainly, because that I guess, I know there was the adopted plan, and then after some of the changes that we're looking at, will that be after reconfigured and realigned, I guess, on the regional impact, and also, I guess that impacts the BRT as well along the Queen Street corridor as well?
Thanks for your question, and that's really what I was alluding to with fare and service integration. So that's the latter part of service integration. Currently, each transit agency in the region is an independent organization, and Brampton Transit is funded by fare box, some gas tax, and then, of course, property taxes. So Brampton Council is independently leading Brampton Transit, and it's the case with other transit agencies as well. So we work very closely with all transit agencies, and we give them as much heads up as we can. We think that there's opportunities over the lifespan of the plan to, for example, better line up the regional transportation plan, local transportation master plans, and enhance the collaboration so that we avoid the situation where we step up service on a corridor, not leaving enough time for local transit agencies to meet every train. And so we hear that consistently from local transit agencies, that sometimes they're caught short a little bit in being able to meet every train. So I think it's complicated because we're a provincial agency and these are local agencies, but collectively, we think that there are improvements that can happen in integrating these services. So again, it's transparent and seamless for the customer, who don't really care at the end of the day who's providing the service.
Through the chair, so also if you look at, looking at your presentation, active transportation,
Yeah.
we talk about building healthy communities, and the integration of active transportation with the regional network. One of the issues at the first committee meeting we had regarding LRT, which is going to stop at Steeles right now in Brampton, is that seamless transfer. The modes of transportation, someone, for example, with a bicycle, that's a real busy corner. And, that's something that's been really discussed. And so that really shed light to me. And how do we integrate our active transportation network with the transit regional network that we're building? And I assume that consultation's going on in that alignment.
Active transportation is very important, but it's also a very difficult and frustrating file, because to create an environment that is pedestrian cycling friendly, it doesn't take a master plan that you can just turn on. It takes thousands of decisions by people like yourselves on individual road widenings or how transit signals are managed. And it's also a cultural change, so that when a developer builds a new community, they build in permeability so that it's easy to get from A to B. When a commercial developer plans a building, that entrances are facing the street. And so it's thousands and thousands of little decisions. And a cultural change for ourselves, for example, who have planned GO stations over the years, sometimes with more attention to vehicular traffic and vehicular access, and not as much pedestrian cycling access. So I think it's a collective responsibility, which makes it more diffuse and more difficult to implement.
Thank you. And just lastly, through the chair, regarding BRT, I was glad to see that you identified that along the Queen. Are we close to, in terms of technology, that identifying a technology which would be best addressed for the Queen Street corridor?
So I think that the discussions are underway. So I don't really have a definitive answer for you on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sparvieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and bonjour à tous, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here at Pure Region. I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, as you're aware, Brampton is in the process of studying the BRT on Queen Street, east-west Queen, and as you probably know, Queen Street is Brampton's highest transit use corridor.
Yep.
And there's a real need for some really rapid transit along that corridor. In speaking with our transit staff just recently, they've indicated that Vaughan is also introducing BRT from their subway, new subway station to just around Wigwas on Highway 7.
Yep.
But they can't go further because down the hill on Islington, there's the train bridge that there's a bottleneck where the roadway goes from 6 lanes to 4 lanes. And the problem there is to have this road widened so that the BRT can connect to Brampton's on Highway 50, and that's what they're planning, what their long-term plans are, is to make that happen. Are you involved at all in seeing this bottleneck resolved at where the trains, the railroad bridge is on, between Kipling and Islington on Highway 7?
On Highway 7, can you help me with, this is a complex area.
This is in
because
Woodbridge. It's in
So this is in Vaughan.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, I'm not aware of that particular issue, but we'll take it back and we'll check if it's a City of Vaughan or York Region responsibility, and we'll make sure that we provide a response.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
The other question I have, some of my, I represent East Brampton, and many of my constituents, they go to the GO station in Malton to take the GO downtown Toronto.
Yep.
And I get a lot of complaints about even at 7:30 in the morning, the trains are overpacked. And some of the constituents are complaining that they can't even get a seat because the trains are so full. Are you aware of that, and are you making any provisions to add more trains in the rush hours to resolve this congestion?
We're always trying to add more trains, and I believe that we have steadily added more trains, but it's always a question of capacity limits. So just to clarify, is the bigger issue for your constituents the train capacity or the parking capacity, or both?
Well, they're complaining about not getting a seat in the train.
In the train.
It's more of that's the capacity of the trains than the parking lot. I haven't heard any problems of them getting parking at the station there. Well, you got the International Center, which is
Right.
a huge parking capacity there too.
Yeah.
So it spills onto that.
So we'll take that back, and I'll check, so this is a different bureaucratic silo that looks after service planning, especially over the next few years, and I'll make sure to get a response to you on that.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I represent the area that does not have all-day GO service on the Milton line, the service that was supposed to have started after the EA was done in 1991. So it's not a new ask. It's an old ask. The project was stopped by the province in 1992. The EA was shelved, and nothing has been done ever since. However, we have had written confirmation from Metrolinx, GO Transit over the years that was given to the former mayor, to myself, to our businesses that were moving into the Meadowvale Business Park, bringing in thousands of jobs. We were given dates for all-day all-day GO service. Thank you, it's hard to say. Excuse me. Needless to say, nothing has materialized. It's been over 25 years that we've been waiting for that service. So forgive me if I'm a little underwhelmed by your proposed 15-minute service, because we've had so many promises from former boards and staff at GO and Metrolinx over the years, and I know what the restrictions are now. They weren't before. We didn't have those problems with CP previously. Had we gone ahead and built the third line, we would have had all-day GO service much sooner, much sooner. But of course, when you delay, the cost triples, quadruples, and you know, it's absolutely ridiculous now what the cost is going to be. What would have been in the millions years ago is now in the billions of dollars, if it even happens at all. We have, in the Meadowvale Business Park alone, we have over 43,000 jobs. The problem is people can't get to those 43,000 jobs from outside Mississauga easily because there is no GO service that is going into the business park. I have 2 GO stations. I'm very fortunate. I have 2 GO stations, both within the Meadowvale Business Park, which is a little ironic because the trains only leave the park in the morning and come back in the afternoon. So they're not bringing employees in. I was grateful that GO Transit built an additional parking lot and access to the other side of the Meadowvale GO station onto Argentia Road to help the Bank of Montreal employees, but all they can do is take a bus in. When Bank of Montreal moved their call center to the Meadowvale Business Park, it was primarily because of written guarantee of all-day service. And most of those employees have now left the call center. There's been a huge turnover in employment. And call centers, I think, do have a big turnover anyway. But when you're operating a 24-hour service 7 days a week, you rely on good transit to get your employees into work. So there've been, we put more buses on. Well, that's really nice, and if they're not stuck in traffic, then, they can get you where you're going. But the GO buses are also, when they're going in and out, they're also prone to traffic jams, to bad roads, bad weather, et cetera. And it's probably faster sometimes to drive than it is to take a bus and negotiate the traffic, because you have to get to the bus station as well. So you're driving your car or taking another bus, whatever. So, right along that corridor, and thank you, Rob, for the update on the numbers, because I didn't have them in front of me this morning, but there's over 77,000 employees along the Milton Line corridor. It's not that we want it because it's a nice thing to do. It's, quite frankly, to get people to work. And it's an important thing to do because we still have some space in the business park. I still have developers. First Gulf is still building office up in the business park on spec. And the biggest drawback to getting people to move in and lease that space, the 100,000 square foot space or larger, is the fact that they cannot get transportation, that companies that want to move, which we think is a good thing, want to move their businesses into Mississauga, into our business parks, they want their employees to be able to get to work, and many of them are moving from downtown Toronto. Some of them want to stay in downtown Toronto. We don't mind if they move out to Mississauga because it gets traffic off the roads and keeps people local. But it is a very, very important part of the regional business plan. And it's, we know all about the goods movement. We're very concerned about the goods movement. We also don't feel that freight should be operating, and we're a good example of that in Mississauga, having had the big derailment. We also don't like the idea that freight is operating right through the middle of one of the fastest growing cities in Canada, sixth largest city in Canada, and then heading in through Toronto, which has even more residents along the rail lines. So, so that is a concern. One of the things that I do not see on here, and here's my question to you, because I'm not going to ask you when we're going to get all-day GO service. I'm not going to put you on the spot because I know you can't answer that question. I don't see any reference here to what Metrolinx is doing in regard to the 407 Transitway and what your plans are. Councillor McFadden and I represent the area that the 407 Transitway will run through. It's been in the works since 1998 when the plan was first drawn out. We're now working on an official plan for the area, and it's based on stations at the Transitway. But I don't see anything in your forward planning, your future planning, that relates to what Operation GO Transit is going to have along that Transitway, which will help. It certainly will not replace the all-day service because it's just going to take people between Markham and Oakville, basically. So what are the plans for that, and why is it not included here?
Thank you very much for your question about the 407 Transitway. We have been in extensive conversations with MTO, who obviously is leading this
Right.
project. It's a bit of a unique case. We believe that traffic volumes on the 407, because they're managed by tolls, actually do not warrant in the short to medium term the dedicated transitway for buses. However, there is an opportunity to more clearly indicate the location of stations and the type of service that would be run there. And that's why we have indicated a regional express bus network, as well as a frequent regional express bus network in the plan, and the 407 would be part of that. So we heard from MTO the need to clarify the role that the 407 will play, and that stations are actually proceeding.
Well, I know the stations are proceeding because we're doing Councillor McFadden and I and our residents are doing the official plan for both the region and the city of Mississauga. And I guess I'm a little shocked, and I think Councillor McFadden is as well, because that's the first time that I've heard the response that you've just given. You know, we have, over the years, since I first received a copy of the plan for the Transitway, and I think it was 1998. I probably still have the same old rollout plan in my office somewhere. That it was to connect the business communities primarily between Markham, Mississauga, and getting people who live in Oakville, getting them off the 407, quite frankly. So, you know, I guess what I'm starting to hear is, well, we can't, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost sounds as if you don't want to impact the toll revenue on the 407 by providing people with buses. The least of my concern is giving the 407 revenue. I think it would be much better to get the people out of their cars, which I think is what we're all trying to achieve, and if they have a bus service, and yes, it will impact the 407, which still has a large capacity because it's not stop and go yet at all times of the day. What it is going to do, however, is get people off the 401 that runs through my ward and starts actually, and where our ward starts, and you can't get onto the 401 at Winston Churchill Boulevard anymore because the traffic is not moving. And it's like that 24 hours a day almost now. The truck traffic in particular, when we're talking about goods movement. So we're not just looking at getting traffic off the 407 with the Transitway, we're looking at getting traffic off the 401 and off our other regional roads like Derry, Steeles, et cetera. So I will leave that with you. I know my time is up, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leniency here. But I really hope that you've listened to the mayor and myself and have the message. And you know, our mayor and her staff have been working very, very hard on the all-day Milton Line service. And I really hope that Metrolinx is listening, because it's just a real need in the region of Peel and in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yanika. Sorry, Councillor Yanika, Councillor Sato took all your time.
No, probably spoke better than I would have too. So, but Antoine, welcome, bienvenue. Antoine, I have a different perspective for you. I want to take a different message back. From what little I know in the years that I've been around, the message I want to convey to you, and maybe to my colleagues as well, is I've gotten to the point where I think we're always discussing the wrong aspects of these and issues like this relative to what we should be considering. And so here's just one man's take on it. We shouldn't be talking about transit and Metrolinx. We should be talking about creating one of the world's greatest cities and destinations. And here's the analogy I will give you. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. I've had the privilege of traveling to many of the world's greatest cities. I have a lot of friends that go as well, so do you. Have any of them ever seen you the next Friday night when they got back from San Francisco or got back from wherever and said, oh man, I was just in San Francisco. Amazing city. Why is that? Well, I rented a car at the airport and you can zip through town easily with a car. I loved it. No one in the history of mankind has ever come back from Rome or from Paris and said that. What they loved was the city. You're just one component. You used the word silo 4 times. That's the problem. You're not a silo. You're integral to transportation, land use planning, and building a joyous city. And I think we need to understand that message a little bit better. I've scribbled this, I keep wanting to write the paper, but I haven't got the time to get around to it. But the continuum of transit in my 30 years has been this. Public transit for the average suburbanite starts out as an unnecessary evil. Then at some point they accept that, well, it's just evil. Then at some point it becomes a necessary evil. We're somewhere along that continuum. In the great cities of the world, they have evolved to it becoming acceptable, it becoming welcome, it becoming vital, and it becoming joyous. Like being able to get on a plane here at night, show up at Charles de Gaulle, take the TGV that's waiting for you there, and you're in Lyon sipping coffee at 10 o'clock in the morning. I didn't talk about how great the transportation, I didn't talk about silos, I talked about the experience. The advantage you folks have at Metrolinx and the province is you have the resources and you have the money to make it happen. And so we've got to understand that you're in an exercise, and we're in an exercise of building great cities that are going to become the places that people want to be. I'm really hooked up and hung up on something I've mentioned to my colleagues that I read a few months ago in the New York Times, and I just think it's so prescient, and I think we have to turn our heads to it. Millennials have two fundamental traits we don't have, and my kids are the same because we had a marvelous dinner conversation about it. Number one, they are not tied to cars like we are. So I remember turning 16, Dad, you know what I want for my birthday? Take me to the MTO. I want to get my permit right away to be able to drive a car. My kids could have given a damn. They could care less about getting the car. They Uber, they drive with their friends. By the way, one of the great reasons why they will not get in a car if they have a drop of alcohol in them. God bless them. I think we've gotten that message out as well. Wonderful. I think it's one of the reasons why they do it as well. The second thing they found out about millennials is they have no sense of place. So I put that to my kids. I said, you know, I was born in Mississauga. I'll die in Mississauga. It's given me everything I have. Kids, do you see yourselves living out your lives in Mississauga? Hell no. What do you mean, no? Oh, no, we can see ourselves as citizens of the world. If the great job offer came in Calgary, I'm gone. Fast forward, I met a group of kids getting ready to go to university at a high school, and I brought that up. There were 80 of them. I put that to them. 78 said, we're gone. They're the people that we will have to compete for in years going forward that are part of the STEM sector, of the business sector that we have to attract. So you can have all the transportation in the world. If nobody wants to live in your damn city, who gives a damn? And we are competing with those cities for those minds to create jobs and be in the future economies. You're a cog in that system. You have to see yourself as vital in that system. So let me give you some examples. When you deal with, and I had the pleasure of meeting one of the people that runs the transportation system for Paris, and as he put it to me, he goes, when I was in Toronto and I'm watching, I think he was watching breakfast television, he goes, and on the bottom corner they have, you know, the transportation, Viva and MyWay and Go, and he goes, what the hell is all of that? I go, well, those are the, he goes, there were 8 systems. I go, yeah, and we all intertwine. You're a rainbow. I don't want a rainbow, I want one system. He said, Nando, do you know in Paris, you know what that amounts to for me? That amounts to a couple of arrondissements and 6 people in a back room that I have run it. How does it work with all these separate people? When I was talking to British authorities and the London Transit Authority about their system, they were talking about the Oyster card that we think is amazing, and we've taken years to get to Presto. And he said, we're throwing out Oyster, we're on to the next card. In fact, Councillor, you have one in your pocket. I go, I'm pretty sure I don't. He goes, can you open your wallet for me? And I do. He pulled out my credit card. He goes, here's the next card. Do I know where you got it from? No. Do I care? If you move, do I care? No. He goes, you just pay it, and if you're in default, the credit card company worries about you. And now that Moneris and other entities will have you do transactions for almost nothing, that's the next card. My point is we're 20 years behind. And with the greatest of respect, much of what you've said makes me feel like I'm still 20 years behind when you talk about silos and those things. So we have a bigger challenge going forward. The world population by the year 2100 will reach 10.5 billion people. All of the people that live in it today, 7.6 billion, will live in cities by then. Which cities will they live in? And it will be decided by, for the ones that we want, their desire to want to live in a marvelous city. You're a part of that system. And so the point that I'm making is we have to look at it from the, are we building cities people want to be in? Are we rewarding density? You know, if you were to describe New York City to many of my constituents and not say it was New York City, they'd think it's a penal institution. Well, it's as big as Mississauga, 6.8 million people, there's only this much green space, there's this much asphalt, you can't own a car, except, my God, who would want to go there? Well, there's 24 flights a day from Toronto, and people want to go there. And the art scene's amazing, and the museum. We are competing with those cities to a degree. And what I beg of you and Metrolinx, and I think you and this government's done a pretty good job of it, is to understand you're a vital part of that process, because the land use planning has to coincide with the transportation strategy, and we can't overthink it, and we can't talk about silos. We have to get away from making it unnecessary evil to acceptable. And if you think about it, we're inverting the graph. And I want to get around my mind around, right, this graph is transportation and public transportation. This is cars. And what's going to happen at some point, we have to have people like me who thought, when I started driving a car, that it was joyous and that it was welcomed and it was acceptable. You've got to move me the other way on that continuum. I've got to start saying, I don't like driving a car anymore. And is this an unnecessary evil because public transit is available to me? That's what happens in the great cities of the world without anybody thinking it's happening. And that's the level that we have to get to. But I think there's so many agencies involved, I'm not sure we're asking the right question when it should be this holistic approach of how do we create a great city? And your role is, and I think you're on the right track, and you've rewarded density in my community with the LRT that's in the lion's share of my community. And that'll bring other great things in the entrepreneurial class. But I think we have to change the paradigm a bit and say, are we in the business of making great cities with land use planning that rewards density because it's necessary, and what role do we all play in that as opposed to staying in our silos? But I give credit to Metrolinx because you've made the investment. It's been a joy working with you on our LRT. And the last point I'll make to my constituents, my colleagues, is you'll recall, we had another land use development application in my ward on Monday. We had it 5 years ago where we almost torched the place, 300 angry residents, and even I said this will never be built. And 5 years later, it's being built where the LRT is now. And from 300 angry residents, we had 8 so-so angry residents because the model makes sense. So you're working well. We have so much more to do, and we've got to do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that exhausts the list. There was about 6 other people on the list, councillors on the list, but no. But I certainly, on behalf of council, want to thank you for your presentation today, and I think you've heard loud and clear from our councillors here. We do appreciate the support that Metrolinx has given us in the past, and working with Metrolinx, our staff, I know appreciates it as well. We certainly want to just ensure that as we go forward, that we meet the expectations and our highest priorities with respect to moving people.
Thank you for your warm welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, we could bring the report forward. I know Councillor Groves has moved. If we get a seconder, Councillor or Gibson, second it. Oh, that's a recorded vote, isn't it? Recorded vote, please. That's on 13.1. That carries. Thank you. That brings us to, I know Paul Snoblin has anxiously been waiting from the Community Safety Programs, Peel Regional Paramedic Services, to demonstrate the use of automated external defibrillator and cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Welcome.
So I'm just going to speak into the mic for a second.
Geez, I usually get nervous when there's this many cops in the room, but
One of the things that, before we get started in actually doing the demonstration, and thanks for having us back again, last year the conversation came up with the AEDs, with just it being graphics with a little light in the corner to highlight what segment you're on. So checking, head tilt, chin lift, doing the compressions. We took that back after the last meeting. So I'm proud to show you our new model going forward. Regardless of what language you speak, it's now an LCD screen that actually shows you everything you need to do as you're doing it. And it actually doesn't move forward until you've done the thing you need to do. And so it's given a visual now, so it's still the same thing. As long as you can push power, you can use an AED. No training is needed, anyone can use it. But literally push power, follow the instructions. So I'm gonna actually do a demonstration. We're gonna do our little hands-on CPR. And I've asked Mayor Thompson to come on down. He's gonna show you how to use the new one. So we'll go through, and if we can pass out the mannequins. Back a little bit to someone, and that is the best selfie. So to use this new one, it's gonna be hard. So to use this new one with all the prompts, I mean, if you want. But. Find someone unconscious, not responsive, not sure what to do, start compressions, calm. Have someone go and get an AED, one of the nice parts. Right now, every day. So you're working with Phil Howard. Days where there's a lot of traffic, but who comes along? Here's the model we're using, so if you would like to, and this is the new. Power on like usual, here's the volts prompts.
Patient selected.
So it has
If
a
patient is
button,
a child, press child button.
so if there is a child, all you have to do is push a button. You don't have to use
Add
special
package.
pads. Yeah, open it up. So just open it up.
Outer care clothing to expose patient's bare chest.
And the little package comes with 2 little scissors.
Outer care clothing to expose patient's bare chest.
So on the actual, while you're setting it up, there is the
Open add package.
and then it will actually show you to open the package.
Add pads to
The
patient's
colors
bare
have
chest.
been altered, so it's not like.
Add pads
The
to patient's
pads
bare chest.
are actually showing on the chest. There they go. So what we gotta do.
Add pads to patient's
So
bare
this
chest.
one. So just.
Add pads to
And then we'll
patient's bare
add the
chest.
second pad. That's all.
Add pads to patient's
He's dead. So once the pads are actually connected to the patient, the
Add pads to
machine
patient's
will
bare chest.
detect that they've been
Start
placed.
CPR. Push to match the zone.
So now just pushing on the center. So it actually displays your compressions on what you're doing. So it actually tells you how deep.
Push harder.
Oh! So this machine walks you these.
Unit powering on.
So the new machine or the new design is even than the prior version. And it just keeps getting better. But this is what we're moving to as a region. What our paramedics show. literally, they unplug it from the AED and plug it right into this and keep going. No longer. That is now is your turn. So if I can get my friends to come on down. So if I get you to stand up, we're just gonna go over doing some compressions. What to do if someone collapses. First thing you need to do, try and wake them up. So try and wake them up. You just didn't know what to do. You gotta see their
Counselor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the demonstration. I think we all look forward to the annual CPR and AED training, and it's become a real part. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for, because we had approached you a couple of years ago and asked you if we could do this as part of Regional Council in November. And I think it's a good refresher for everyone, but it also gets the thousands of people that are watching us on live stream today, hello, gives them an opportunity to see how easy it actually is. But, Mr. Chairman, I had asked, I'd asked staff if they could uncover the stretcher, and this is the new one that, as you might recall, when we were dealing with paramedics at our committee a couple of years ago, we had a request from our paramedics for the stretchers that were easier, more automatic, easier for them to move and transport patients. So I had asked Paul if perhaps they could demonstrate, if someone could demonstrate how it works and just give us a little bit of an overview.
A lot of enhancements to it, a lot of features that are beneficial. Just simple things. So no more like, oh my back. Now it's a finger workout. So it's fantastic. Your stretchers are this in the morning. But if you need to go into an elevator, even on our old ones, it's the little things you don't think of. Now we can literally have your elevator piece. This up and down is ease of use. Side rails, the actual mattress itself. So if you're on a driveway, and if it will do one of these, there is now with the lock on, we can actually lock these wheels into place, and now it's more like a grocery cart. The use of the stretcher to go up and you can now lift Joel up and down with ease of stop when it reaches its loading height. Just like that. Then it goes into loading. So the nice part Part with loading is the ambulance has out and there's arms. So when you this into the ambulance, grab the stretcher. Pull this and just walk right. Down the little round. Center there, you can't. You might be able. You guys can see it. So this is it's right over here, but it won't do anything. Push it. So this is we'll let him down now before the nurse starts.
Counselor Sato?
Thank you. Thank you for the demo. That was amazing. You know, I think council should be very proud of the fact that through the committee that we heard from our paramedics, we really listened, and we heard how much easier this would be physically on our staff. And you know, we were all, I think, a little frustrated, at least those of us on the committee were a little frustrated, as were the paramedics, that it took a little longer than we wanted for us to get them. But I think it was a great investment into not just the well-being and the health and well-being of our paramedics, but also of the patients, as it makes transportation, as you saw, transportation of the patient, I think, much more comfortable, if you can be comfortable if you're being transported. But I think it was money well spent at the Region of Peel, and I really want to thank our paramedics, and particularly the paramedics that from the union that spoke to us and came to us and really put their case forward and educated us on the needs of the staff. And I also want to thank the staff that worked to get David and Jeanette. I think you were very instrumental in this as well, in getting the purchase. And I know you wanted to test them, and we were all very frustrated with the delay. But they are finally here, and I'm glad you had them today so that the rest of council could see the demonstration. I think it shows we are concerned with our staff, and we want to make sure that that the equipment that they have is the best possible to provide them with good health and welfare, and also for our citizens who have to make use of this service. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your support again, in all aspects. We're very fortunate.
Thank you. Counselor Fonseca?
Thank you, through you, Chair Dale. Yes, thank you so much for being here, for the little training and the demonstration, and to all the paramedics here, and also the committee for listening, and not only with the defibrillators, but with the stretcher. I did have, with regards to the stretcher, I did have two questions around ease of, or seamlessness and ease of transportation. So in an aquatics environment, in a pool environment, it looks like this stretcher would be able to get into those facilities a lot easier and be good, like, for the paramedics arriving. But in an aquatics environment, you would have, you could potentially have someone, whether they're in the water, or it could even be someone in the stands that's on a spinal board. So just in terms of the transition, is there been any discussion around, and I say aquatics environment because I know in an aquatics environment, I'm familiar with how they've actually gone through and made an ease of transportation to a certain extent, but where the spinal boards are located in pool environments, especially in new pool facilities. Can you speak a little bit to, is there any, from transferring from a spinal board onto the stretcher with that, and then also in other sport environments where you would have on scene St. John's ambulance, or not even just sport environments, but also it could be like a cultural festival or something where St. John's might have, again, a spinal board, but they wouldn't have this, this type of stretcher. If you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, MJ, can you put up your hand for just one sec? So MJ here, talking about experiences, we took that one step further is we worked with the city of Brampton and Mississauga. So we were at we went to Professor's Lake and we actually did scenarios with the lifeguards. From water extrication on the boat to onto shore, onto our stretcher, into the ambulance. And we went over and reviewed that whole process. And then again, that was done in Mississauga. And MJ was a big part of organizing that on our behalf, working with the cities.
That's great.
And we're continuing to do it, whether it be ski patrol. So it goes on and on. With St. John Ambulance, that connection there, we actually, our old stretchers that we had, we donated several of those to St. John so they would actually have that equipment because it was still good equipment. And literally to do a change from one stretcher to the other, all paramedics are trained in a shift or to move someone from bed. It's the same with nursing homes, hospitals, care facilities where you have to transfer from a bed. So St. John will oftentimes have a patient on their stretcher. And then we just move them over to ours. On a spinal board, it's a matter of just lifting so we can bring that stretcher really low. So you're not lifting as high. And it's just, and there you have the support of lifeguards as well. So you can have more hands and then getting that stretcher. And then the rest is just as status quo.
Excellent, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Sprovieri.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Just an observation, the stretcher, it's a great design and looks really a space age type. One observation though, I noticed that for a tall person, there's no headrest for somebody's lying there, in bad shape. There's no place for the head for a tall person. Can that pad, can that be extended or designed to be extended so you have better support there?
As for a pad being extended, no. What have you run into, MJ?
So when we have people that are taller like myself, there's a few options. One is unfortunately the feet the rest, or with that stretcher there are two little.
Oh, by just bending the legs?
Yes, exactly. There's two little red loops that pulls up and that'll bend the knees.
Yeah,
So to make it more comfortable for everyone, for transport's sake, but especially people like myself.
I understand, yeah. Because I was thinking about the automobiles today, they have the headrest that goes up and down. Maybe that's another innovation can think
The
for the
next
future.
generation.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chairman.
You have to bring that to the manufacturer. But, no, thanks so much for being here, and I want to thank Councillor Sadel for initiating this originally to have us continue with this exercise. We can always use the training, for sure. But I was very impressed with the new stretcher, and I think we're all equally impressed with the care that you provide to all our residents on a daily basis. And it's not just the care, but it's the comfort that you provide, not only transporting someone to and from a hospital, but while they're at the hospital. I know that means a lot to our residents, and I can certainly speak firsthand, experiencing some family members that have used the service and have been very grateful for the care that you provided.
And that's thanks to our frontline paramedics
all
who
of
are
them.
doing this every day.
Yeah, they're doing
So-
a great job. So now you can get back to work to save more lives.
Yes.
Good stuff. All right. Councillor Sato, if you want to, we'll bring the recommendation forward. It's one for receipt, if you'd move that. And then Councillor Parrish second it. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. That brings us now to Dr. Sheldon Cheskas, Medical Director, Peel Regional Paramedic Services and Sunnybrook Center for Pre-Hospital Medicine.
Still here?
I don't know if he's, there he is. He's signing autographs.
I was having a good laugh because Snowball now wants to sit next to me. Okay. So guys, that was, I've been doing this for, it must be 25 years. I've made presentations here, made presentations in Halton, and never have I seen that. Whenever I've seen actually the CPR part, just so you know, that'll be on Twitter, that'll be on our Sunnybrook website. That is like one of a kind. So when I actually speak around the world, that will be my opening slide. So I think it's an amazing component. And what Nando said in terms of the last talk about being 20 years behind, I like to bring you 20 years ahead. So you bring them over here and they'll say, here's how you run an EMS system, okay? And Councillor Sato, when I took out of the Metrolinx talk, I want Milton. There's just so, when I look at my practice, I see everyone moving to Milton. It's just a hugely growing area and requires that kind of service. So that's my Metrolinx part. I was back there, I thought it was in the penalty box, okay? Just started cooling my heels there. So now let's get on to the talk after my little verbiage there. So where are we going? Where are we now? Give you guys some thoughts with respect to some of the new innovations and some of the stuff that you saw here today. So where my update's going to be today is really this PAD program that Paul Snoblin's put together. It's truly one of a kind, and some of the stuff that Paul is doing, I think many people are unaware of, but researchers in the world are quite aware of what Paul is doing related to responder, follow-up, and outreach. I'm going to talk again a little bit about some of these new technologies, this idea of crowdsourcing to improve bystander CPR, talk about this drone technology. Whenever I speak around the world, we speak about drones and people's eyes light up, like this is something really cool, something really new, and will Peel Region be the first to actually use this type of technology? So first thing about AEDs in the community, for many years, we knew there were AEDs out there, we just didn't know where they all were. And I think Paul's done an incredible job at creating an AED registry. So over 1,000 defibrillators are out there in the region, but now we know where they are. So that when we dispatch people to sites, we can tell them where the closest AED is. The registration of these AEDs within our program is critical to ensuring that not only we know the location, but we know whether the AEDs are functional or not, because many of the weaknesses in public programs is you put an AED out there in some of these programs, you don't look at them for 5 years, they're not functional when you go to use it. When you have someone like Paul at the helm, we know that every AED out there is functional and ready to be used at the time of need. So I think he's really done a phenomenal job in creating that registry. Our loaner programs for special events that require defibrillators has also been something that Paul has pioneered. The community CPR AED stuff that we're doing, again, when we look at bystander CPR, for people who have a public arrest now, almost 60% are getting bystander CPR. That's almost unheard of when we started here 20 years ago. 25% of them are having an AED applied. So that could be higher, but that's a huge number compared to what we're seeing around the world. But what Paul does that has never been done before is Paul interviews the bystanders after they actually take part in a cardiac arrest. So by doing that, what he is able to learn is the emotional turmoil that the bystander goes through and whether they need help, but also are there things that could be done easier from a defibrillator point of view that make the ease of use better. No one's ever done that before. And this idea now of focusing not only on the patient, but the bystander is leading research in that particular area. Paul is a world leader in that, so I really congratulate him for taking that total care focus in cardiac arrest research. First AED, I think last time we talked here, we spoke about Pulse Point, the ability to use a mobile app to actually mobilize resuscitation to places in and around the region. First AED is very similar to the Pulse Point app, but it doesn't require integration within our dispatch system. It focuses on giving everyone a particular role who responds to it, gives directions to the location, instructions are assigned to each individual. So our feeling this device may actually be a better application for use within our system, and we're certainly exploring its use to crowdsource for AEDs in the public. And the last thing, I guess, is this idea of drones. So, you know, we talked about it last year, this idea in terms of Google, Amazon, everyone is using drone technology now to deliver something. Whether it be a service, maybe medication, maybe a wide range of devices. We began looking at the idea of delivering AEDs via drone in a paper that we published last year, and we showed very, very clearly in our publication that you can situate drones within a region to significantly decrease the response time of EMS to cardiac arrest. Now, in the last year, we've actually developed a letter of agreement with Drone Delivery Canada, a actual company that develops the drones that are able to do this, and we're actually looking at piloting this technology in the town of Caledon in early 2018. We will be the first in the world that's actually doing this. So a lot of people talk about it, we're going to actually do it. Okay, so there's your 20 years in terms of doing this. So we're right now looking at situating the drones in a variety of different areas in the Caledon area and actually looking at different flight paths to ensure that they're actually safe and able to be done. Because this technology really, where you want to start it is in the rural areas, because that's the areas that really would benefit the most. Once the technology is actually made more specific, then you can bring it into the urban areas. But the rural areas, we feel, is where the big bang for the buck is. So this is actually going to happen and likely within the next year. So great stuff on the AED side, the CPR side, and really could not have been done without Paul's work. So really congratulate him for what he's been able to accomplish. On the research side, one study that we're almost completed and a new study that we're looking at with respect to people in a particular rhythm when we see them in cardiac arrest. So last year I presented the work on the first study, field implementation of Autoric device and ST elevation MI. Really what this is in simple layman's terms is using an automated type of blood pressure device on a patient's arm when they're actually going to the cath lab and having a procedure done to open up a blocked vessel. So there's some research that suggests that this may be beneficial. We're doing the first large study in the world to actually look at patient outcomes. We're actually going to compare 900 patients before this intervention to 900 patients after, look at outcomes to see if these patients actually do better in terms of survival and less side effects from their heart attack. So we began this back in 2016 in June. We're slated to actually be completed by May of next year. So we've really done a phenomenal job in enrolling patients. We've already analyzed our data on the 900 patients in the before phase. This slide is actually old. We've actually already enrolled 600 patients in the after phase. One thing about Region Appeal, we may need Metrolinx, but we don't need heart attacks. We got plenty of them, okay? There's a lot of heart attacks that happen in Peel Region. And it's like an optimum area to actually look at this type of intervention. So we've really done a phenomenal job in collecting this particular data, even split between Trillium and Brampton Civic with respect to the number of patients. The interesting thing too in the integration of our EMS system, when we look at the data from the Cardiac Care Network in Ontario, both Brampton and Mississauga, two cath labs within our region, have the fastest times to PCI of anyone in the region, anyone in the province of Ontario. So when you have a heart attack in the field and you call 911 and you get to the cath lab, no area does it quicker than in Peel Region. So we're really, really happy about that because, as Paul said, with the stretcher and the integration with the defibrillator, we've been able to integrate an EMS system into the hospital system. So if you're going to have a heart attack, please have it here. You're going to get exceptional care. So we're really, really quite proud of that. And the last part I'm going to talk about is, again, revolutionary, definitely 20 years ahead of the time, this idea of refractory ventricular fibrillation. So when you see that defibrillator out there, the defibrillator is very great when the patient's in a rhythm that the defibrillator can shock. That's the best thing that can happen to a patient. Occasionally what happens, though, is you get patients who the defibrillator shocks and the patient still stays in that rhythm. And it continues and continues. We give them drugs, we give them shocks, and those patients, for whatever reason, can't come out of that rhythm. So I've done some work in the particular area of what's known as double sequential defibrillation, this idea of actually applying two defibrillators with pads in different positions to actually get these patients out of ventricular fibrillation. So whenever we say it in the public, they say, oh my God, two people, two defibrillators, we're going to blow up the patient. we're not going to actually blow up the patient. Actually, the patients are actually going to do quite well if this is actually effective. And this has been done for years in the EPS lab. So electrophysiologists have used this for years for patients in atrial fibrillation and other rhythms. But now we're starting to see this technique come out there in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And we're wondering, could this be something that could make a difference for patients with this? And important to understand, when people survive cardiac arrest, they survive this rhythm. If you're not in this rhythm, it's unlikely that you're going to survive. So clearly it makes sense we should try to increase the number of patients who can survive from this rhythm. So we had some interest initially. There was a case report out of the States, 40-year-old male who was playing basketball, had a contusion to his chest, and developed this rhythm, and was actually had double sequential defibrillation done in the emergency department and survived to hospital discharge. But our big interest in this happened about a year ago with a 28-year-old female who just delivered a baby 1 month ago, and she had a cardiac arrest. She had standard CPR, she had the usual treatment that we provide, and had 6 shocks. And at this time, I was just talking about this technique. And I remember specifically, because one of our instructors, we have to get oversight, so medical control to actually do this technique. They called Sunnybrook, the paramedic, described the case to the physician. Physician said, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. If Cheska said it's okay, go ahead. They had 1 double sequential shock. Patient returned ROSC and survived to hospital discharge. Now this patient, we visited this family, our group, about 6 months ago, little baby, 1-year-old, and the mother's doing perfectly fine. I can guarantee you today that patient would have survived without that system of care. So this is something that's clearly interesting and has a potential, and we don't really know. Is it the energy that 2 defibrillators give, or is it simply the fact that the pads have changed position that allow more of the heart to be defibrillated? Is it both, or are you just lucky? So one of the issues is, when you look out there right now, there's lots of case series, there's lots of little reports, great stories like I just gave you, but there's no science. There's nothing to say scientifically that this is better than what we've done. So I've worked on this for the last year. I've been fortunate enough to develop and get grant money to do research that we're actually going to do here in the region of Peel, Halton in the city of Toronto, and the study is known as DOSE-VF, or double sequential external defibrillation in refractory VF. And what we're going to do is take these patients who present with this particular rhythm, so they come in with a rhythm that's shockable, and if they have 3 shocks and they haven't responded, they're just going to be randomized then to standard care, which is what we're doing now. The second arm will be switching the pads from the current position to the AP position, and the third arm will be double sequential defibrillation. It's the first study in the world that's actually been done to look at this. I've been talking about it for the last year, and essentially every agency in Canada and many in the States want to be part. We just don't have money to include them all. So we're actually just going to do this in our area here. We're looking at starting it in February of 2018. So we're going to be the first to actually see, is there science to this technique? And if there is, I think you're likely going to see a large number of people survive. So the study, double sequential external defibrillation, it's on the website, clinicaltrials.gov. And really, I'm so proud to be here. I think we have an amazing region. I think we have an amazing EMS system. I think we do a phenomenal service to the citizens in this region, and we couldn't do this without you guys. I think you provide our support every time I'm here, and it's unconditional. And I think we've been able to reward that support by saving more lives in the region. So I thank you very much, and without that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Dr. Cheskis, thank you for what you do. And under your leadership and in empowering the EMS, it's been amazing what we've been able to accomplish. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
To follow back in Caledon with the rural areas with the drone technology, I think is a wonderful idea, and how we can assist to go forward. And I know this is something that we see that's happening everywhere. The Brampton Flying Club's been doing seminars, and when you go to listen to work with Flight Pass and everything, they say that if you're working from a command center, it just makes it much easier. Here you go, just give us a call, what's going on, and we're good with it. I think the recreational ones are what is crazy, and it's great that people love the technology and embracing it, but it's to live within their means. The question I have, I guess, to you as well as maybe back to the Region Appeal is, we have to figure out how to make this work, because it doesn't matter. Public Works can use it to look for potholes versus manned time. It's huge on what they can do on road assessments. Fire use it to find the hot spots, or fire can use it to find people stuck under the ice, like what we had in Terracotta.
Yeah.
The challenge is saving lives, and I'm just wondering, to make this drone technology and where the command and the training expertise, is this something that needs to come under the emergency management? And I know we're looking at the CAD system, harmonizing that. Is this another way to integrate in how we make this work, making future steps? I know we're doing a pilot project in Caledon, but the reality is, from what I've seen with technology, it doesn't matter if it's for agriculture or what's going on. The drone with the technology with the infrared lens that they have developed from the University of Guelph, they can tell a plant under stress before a naked eye can pick it up. It's amazing how they can do it.
So, to me, I think Paul, again, has done a lot of work on this. We've worked with Drone Delivery Canada, and they've really got the technology down pat. Again, very different, and this is one of the issues when you read about this idea of drones. It depends where you are in the world. There's many places that will only allow sight-of-line drones, so you can actually see where the drone is. That's not what we're talking about.
That's right.
We're talking about high-speed delivery of drones that originate from a central dispatch center. So the call comes to 911, the call goes simultaneously to our paramedic, fire, and the drone dispatcher. And the drone dispatcher then dispatches the drone dependent on the location in the town of Caledon once we actually set up the sites. But in our study, we found that our response time from EMS, and it's excellent, it may be 5.5 minutes at the median, 8 minutes at 90%. We were down to 2 minutes using drone technology. So it can really make a huge difference, but I think we have the infrastructure in place. It's just a matter of getting it out there, seeing how it impacts by weather conditions, and those are the types of things that we need to work out before we put it on. But I think we've got a great plan in terms of once a drone is there, how do we follow up? How do we actually interact that with our system? I think we've got a great plan in place, just a matter of time till we do it.
Because I can see this getting much bigger than just not EMS. I can see where this is a start, but all I'm just saying holistically, let's not get ourselves into silos. Let's make sure that it complements everything.
And the beauty of this, I think when we put our article out there was another article out of Europe. There's tons of naysayers. Tons of people say it can't be done. That makes me want to do it more. I love when they say we can't do it. But there's plenty of things they said we couldn't do, and we've been successful with them, so we're looking forward to it.
Well, as you know, we've had instances, as you said, the Forks, the Credit, and Albion Hills and different ones. So I think, to me, there's going to be a huge opportunity to be able to really prove that there's worth in this investment. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Justice. A question for you. Just for general information, are most heart attacks caused by blockages of our arteries when a heart attack occurs?
Most heart attacks, most heart attacks are related to a decrease in blood supply to the heart, which is related generally to a blockage of one of the coronary arteries in the heart.
Okay. Now, the reason I asked the question is a while ago I read an article where in the U.S. people can go, there's a procedure, some sort of scan where people can get scanned and they will check your arteries to see if people have any blockages or partial blockages, and then they take action to correct the problem, go in and clean them out and so on. Do we have the same program here in Canada?
What they're doing there is doing what's known as a CAT scan. So you're actually doing a CAT scan of the coronary arteries, and what you're looking for is basically the calcium buildup within those arteries, in those coronary arteries. So it's called a coronary artery calcium CT scan, and that obviously if your coronary calcium score is high, then there's a good chance that there's a high level of blockage within that artery. So some are using it as screening tests, some are using it as a screening test in people who have a high risk for disease. It's quite expensive, high level of radiation. So I think it's a real balance between, is there a high probability of the disease? And if so, do we do this test before doing a more interventional test, such as an angiogram? So really, at the end of the day, the angiogram is a gold standard. This is a screening test, and it's one of many different types of screening tests you can use. I think it's a good test, but again, a bit expensive, lots of radiation.
And is it available in Canada?
Yeah, yep.
Oh, it is
Yeah.
here, right?
Oh, yeah, we got some stuff here.
Well-
We're not 20 years behind.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
No problem. You're welcome.
You always, wake us up here whenever you come. And I'm amazed at your energy. That's great. Thank you very much.
I was before until snowballing came around.
Dr. Cheskis, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and one of the things I appreciate today is the compliments that you've paid not only to Paul, but to all the paramedics. And, certainly under your leadership with the support of the paramedics and the assistance of the drone technology, we're on the leading edge of providing or helping to provide better health care, not only in this region, but I think in the province, in the country, and as you said, across the world. So we greatly appreciate all the work that you've done. And we know the portfolio you hold. To have the respect that you have for Peel, we greatly appreciate that.
I thank you so much for your time. Thanks, guys.
We'll bring the report forward. Mayor Thompson, move it, and second by Councilor Sprovieri. All in favor then? Carried. Thank you. Okay, our next delegate then is Natalie Kaminsky and Betty Williams, Interim Women's Health Promotion Coordinator, Peel HIV/AIDS Network.
Good morning, Your Worship,
Welcome.
and members of council. I'd like to say thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to come and speak with you this morning. So to begin, as I said, my name is Betty Williams, and I'm one of the harm reduction coordinators now. My role has changed at FAN, which is our acronym for the Peel HIV/AIDS Network. FAN has long been a leader in providing support services and advocacy to marginalized groups within Peel region. Such as the women that I'm here to speak with you about today. We recognize through our work that experiences such as homelessness, poverty, mental health issues, substance use, gender-based violence, as well as stigma and discrimination, have a significant impact on women's overall health and well-being. The group that I'm referring to are underreached and often hidden. To talk about who it is specifically that I'm referring to, we're referring to the marginalized women within Peel who are precariously housed or chronically homeless and are street-based, living in poverty, experiencing gender-based violence, are active substance users, dealing with complex physical and mental health issues compounded by the above factors, participating in survival sex work. And what that means is that they're unable to exercise their rights to say no because they're in desperate need of basic needs. Through FAN's Safe Space Sex Work Drop-In, which was geared to provide a safe space for street-based sex workers in downtown Brampton, it was evident that the demographics of those who attended included women who are falling under the categories that I previously listed. These women also experience a significant amount of social isolation, which further compounds the issues that they face. The problem with this group is that they're experiencing extreme poverty, homelessness, unsafe and unstable housing. We're relying on couch surfing or whatever it is that they have to do to provide a roof over their head at any given time. Excuse me. Mental and physical health issues such as PTSD, substance use, and nutritional deficits. Mental health and physical health issues, legal issues with the criminal justice system, child welfare system, and also landlord and tenant issues. Significant social isolation, discrimination based on the stigmas associated with the complex issues that they're dealing with. Lack of access to women-centered, non-judgmental support services with a harm reduction approach. Without safe spaces for these women and no current single women-centered shelter, these groups are forced to make decisions based purely on survival. This aligns with the findings of our recently completed sex work needs assessment, as well as data used to develop innovative service delivery models created to address similar populations in Toronto and British Columbia. To further exemplify the immediate need to implement such service models, since the completion of our data collection for our needs assessment, 2 of the 49 respondents to our needs assessment have been murdered. 1 has passed from an overdose, and yet another is currently missing and presumed dead. Further, another 2 women who were clients of FAN's harm reduction program have also passed from overdose. These women have all experienced either periodic or chronic homelessness. These deaths have significantly impacted the community we work with and has resulted in the forming of the Women's Community Action Group, who, along with FAN's support, are advocating for solutions to these problems. This brings me to why I'm here today. Although the Women's Community Action Group and FAN recognize that the implementation of a women's-only shelter will take time and a large financial commitment, it is imperative to raise awareness of these issues that the women face and to advocate for an interim solution. As a result, I would like to introduce the innovative service delivery models that I previously mentioned, a combination of which would be a relatively easy interim solution to meeting the needs of the women in our community. Sistering in Toronto provides 24-hour safe space drop-in with crisis intervention, prevention, support for trauma and abuse, case management and housing supports, hot breakfast and lunch, day beds for napping, peer programming, referrals to needed services, counseling, workshops, and outreach. The WISH program in Vancouver, BC provides a low-barrier drop-in space from 6 p.m. until 12 p.m., 7 days a week. It is a place to rest with hot meals, showers, and clothing, peer programming, a learning center, a mobile access van for community harm reduction outreach, referrals and supports, access to nursing care in an on-site clinic, as well as social networking and community building activities. Combining these existing and successful models from these programs, we can create a 24-hour safe space, which would be of both economic and social benefit to Peel, and provide much-needed resources, support, and will help to alleviate the isolation that the women feel. What Peel HIV/AIDS Network is currently working on, we have an Ontario Trillium Foundation Grow Grant that we have applied for, which would give us the opportunity to create a women-centered harm reduction space. At this time, with the funding that we've applied for, it would provide us with an extended hour safe space drop-in, peer programming that would be sex work inclusive, active substance user inclusive, LGBTQ+ inclusive, provide counseling and support services, and give us the option for a potential future program for a safe consumption site. FAN's current application is still pending to create this space, and although we are still waiting to hear if the application has been approved, it would still only partially fund our initiative. We at FAN would like to be part of implementing a solution to the significant and urgent need of some of Peel's most vulnerable community members, and are currently seeking additional resources to make this happen regardless of the outcome of the Ontario Trillium Foundation grant. As such, we would like to ensure that as Council considers the homelessness report that you will be hearing later on today, that you keep in mind the needs of this community and assist FAN and the Women's Community Action Group with our efforts to help keep Peel's women safe. At this time, on behalf of the Women's Community Action Group and Peel HIV/AIDS Network, I would like to thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. If you just stay in place, Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Betty, for coming this morning to delegate. I just want to commend you on the work that you do, as well as your community outreach coordinator. He's doing a great job as well. He's very active online, and I think that's a really good thing for your organization. At the appropriate time, I'd just like to move that the delegation is referred back to staff to be addressed as part of our housing and homelessness program. We will be also hearing about the gaps in February when that report comes forward. So I'd like to see your organization and the work that you do included in that overarching category. And definitely there's a need. We recognize that, and we'd like to look at it all together. So thank you again for coming.
I think, Councillor Downey, we could take that as direction to staff to reach out to the group. Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you, and I was going to make the same suggestion, but I want to thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Gibson and I represent the area of Main and Church in Brampton, where a lot of the activities and resources, quite frankly, from the region, the municipality, the Peel Regional Police, a lot of time and effort is spent in that part of the world. But at best, we're treading water. We're hearing from almost daily from the homeowners and the business owners in that part of the world who are impacted, their businesses, their quality of life issues are being impacted as well. The coexistence is not, it's not desirable at the best of times, but it is really reaching the breaking point for that community. So you've got a great deal of appreciation that I'd like to extend your way from Councillor Gibson and myself for the work that you do. I have actually just this Monday night of this week, or Tuesday night, I guess it was, Councillor Miles and I were at a meeting where a business owner came forward to express some concerns that she's having in the neighborhood. It's interesting when you, on your slide 54-4, and you talk about some of the experiences of these women, it really helps us to walk a mile in their shoes. It's not something that everybody is sympathetic to when it's impacting on your life, when you're living and trying to coexist in the neighborhood. So anything that we can do in terms of our resources here at the city to work collaboratively, and a big part of it is education, but the bigger part of it is having the services and the programs available at that moment in time when they're needed by these young women. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for coming today. I would like to add to what Councillor Downey and others will probably say. Oh, I don't see anybody else on the board, but I'd like to see a study done by our staff to look at what other municipalities across Canada are doing. We like to consider ourselves front runners in services and caring and all these things. And I know we're not doing well in this department. So I would like to ask staff, when they come back with, including you in their studies, to also have a look at a comparison with other large cities across the country. I know in Mississauga, because we're close to the airport, you can go into a restaurant and see 4 young girls with one guy sitting there, and they're all on text phones and they're all being dispatched. It's really brutal. And some of them still have acne. It's just so upsetting as a mother of 2 girls, and now I have a granddaughter, that we're not addressing that problem too. So I would really like to ask our staff to expand what they're doing and put us on a spectrum with other large cities, especially large cities with international airports like Vancouver, and just see what we're doing. I don't think we're doing anywhere near what we should be doing. And I think it's not fair for us to be depending on agencies like yours who are begging grants from a Trillium Foundation to take care of our citizens. So I thank you for what you're doing, but I think we have to step up to the plate and help you. And we have to put some money behind it. That's what we're here for. So if the staff's willing to do that type of study without an official motion, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think in addition to what Councillor Downey presented, that we'll just add that as direction to staff to come back, then reach out to the group. I certainly want to thank you as well for being here today and for your presentation. As you can see, we are concerned, and the staff will be reaching out to you and getting back to you and coming forward with a report to council in the future.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's very encouraging, and thank you to all council members.
Councillor Downey, if you'd move receipt of the deputation, seconded by Councillor Parrish. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. No, this can't come forward. Our next delegate then is Jessica Wang, member of Peel Food Security Task Force, and Britt McKee, EcoSource, informing council of the recently completed Peel Food Charter and requesting its endorsement. And just so members of council know, I believe it's in the lounge, and we'd ask that you all sign it. Thank you. Welcome, ladies.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Dale and members of council. We're very excited to be here today. We've both been working on the creation of the Peel Food Charter for several years, along with more than 800 community members and community stakeholders. So we're excited to present the charter to you today for your endorsement.
Morning. The Food Security Task Force was established in 2013. recognizing the importance to both address the immediate food insecurity issues and the long-term food security systemic issues. The task force has two working groups. One is to make an environmental scan to address, to create an interactive map of existing food programs in the region of Peel. The map identifies more than 200 food programs and is accessible online for the public and service providers to help them navigate and utilize what's available. And the second is to create a food charter as a guide in achieving food security to ensure we meet the needs and reflect the diversity of all who live and work in Peel in the long run.
Food security and why it's important. As Jessica mentioned, the Peel Food Charter responds to the growing issue of food insecurity in the region of Peel by articulating a collective vision and areas of action for achieving a just and equitable food system for all. So the Peel Food Charter promotes food security, which is defined as when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. A food secure community has many different components, but three key elements include reliable access to food, engagement across all sectors, and promotion of physical, social, economic, and environmental well-being.
So how did we come up with the charter? To start, the working group reached out to the community for inputs on what they see as important to be included in the charter, and the responses were analyzed and synthesized into a draft. We then went back to the community for feedback on improvements, and taking their responses into consideration, we further refined the charter with Region's communications team and arrived at the charter as it is now. Through the 2 phases of public consultations, a total of over 800 individuals and organizations were involved in developing the Peel Food Charter. As shown in the charts, a wide range of stakeholders from general public to social services to agricultural groups and the business sectors were engaged in the process.
The result of this extensive consultation process was the creation of the Peel Food Charter, which articulates that collective vision for a just and sustainable secure food system in Peel. It presents 6 themes, each with 2 goals as well as example opportunities for action. For example, under the theme of community engagement and decision-making, the public consultation process revealed a priority for ensuring the community, including a range of partners, drive policies and decision-making that affects food. To achieve this goal, the Charter recommends the creation of an ongoing group of community partners dedicated to advocate and implement the Peel Food Charter.
Though the charter is complete, the work is yet to be finished. So the next step is to launch the charter into the wider community to raise awareness and to inspire change. Having said so, the charter on its own is just words on paper. So we need to establish a Food Action Council to help champion the vision so that words can be translated into actions. And we cannot do any of this without the endorsement of stakeholders across the food system. That brings me to one of the main reasons we're here today, which is to request you, the Peel Regional Council as a whole, to endorse the charter and to strive for the vision it stands for.
And we'd also like to acknowledge everyone that helped us get to this point. The Peel Food Charter would not be possible without the inputs of those in the wider community who've contributed their thoughts and time to shape a food secure Peel. There's a special thanks that's required for the Food Charter Working Group and the Food Security Task Force, as well as organizations that were involved in the consultation and shaping of the Charter, including EcoSource, Caledon Community Services, the United Way of Peel, Peel Agricultural Advisory Working Group, and staff at the Region of Peel. Thank you for your support and your time and helping us work together to achieve a food secure Peel.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you for coming today. This is quite interesting. I noticed on the people that you had in your working group, you don't have the Mississauga Food Bank, nor do you have any of the community food banks that operate quite successfully through Mississauga. I'm not sure how you could come up with your final plan without consulting with the people who are currently doing a huge lion's share of the distribution of people to or food to people who are poor?
Through the chair, in fact, we have engaged food banks. Actually, they were part of our engagement and consultations. They were not actively in the working group to actually write out the charter itself, but they were part of our consultation. So they were actively involved.
As you move forward, though, would it not be incumbent upon you to have, I see Chris Hatch up in the audience, someone like Chris Hatch who manages probably 100 of these food distribution centers single-handedly wearing his Superman suit. I really think you're missing an important cog in the wheel if you don't invite him. And I know Eden Food for Change does things beyond just food. They show people how to get back on their feet so that they can provide for themselves. The other thing is an essential part of all this is appropriate housing. And I think the people that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing are the ones that are coming to you because of food insecurity. So I think this is a good start, but I'd like to see you expand it a great deal before it becomes, I don't know what you want to become. You want to become a permanent committee, or I'm not sure what the direction is.
Through the chair, well, the creation of the Peel Food Action Council would oversee the helping us achieve the vision and the implementation of the charter. So securing the endorsements and ensuring that we're actually tracking progress towards achieving what we've laid out in the charter. So the permanency of that council would depend obviously on regional interest and support. But
By support, do you mean funding?
I believe in the report that accompanies this delegation, there was a request for some staffing support to facilitate that process.
And what's the amount that you'd be requesting?
I would have to refer you back to the report.
I read about 50 reports and I have 93 tags in here. You can't
We
refresh
can-
your memory on the amount?
We can provide that for you afterwards.
Are we talking 100,000, 200,000?
Well, through the chair.
Councillor Parrish, I'm going to ask Janet to respond to that.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, just if I made a couple of comments that you've made, Councillor Parrish. So we are asking for council's endorsement and approval today of the creation of a Peel Food Action Council, which would, of course, have representation from food banks and other emergency food providers. We recognize their importance as a piece of the whole food system. In last week's budget presentation, I requested to staff related to poverty reduction. Part of the work they would be doing would be on this Peel Food Action Council. I requested the FTEs, but the funding was from savings from within. So it was an FTE request, but with no budget impact.
Okay, then the two persons that you requested will be working on various strategies on reducing poverty.
Yes, and I think when you sit through the homelessness report and the presentation today, you'll see that there's a bit of an underlying theme in the work and the shift towards looking at poverty from a whole systems perspective and trying to focus our investments upstream before things like poverty become a crisis situation. So those two positions would definitely be working on poverty reduction initiatives, and this is one of them.
Okay, and those two positions you assume you can cover from within?
We can, yes.
I hope you're right, but if you're not, I hope you come back and ask for money. Thank you.
Councillor Miles.
Yeah, unfortunately, it always seems like it comes down to money. This council has been spending a lot of time, well, we always spend a lot of time on human service areas, but certainly the full issue or the huge issue of housing and homelessness and poverty is top of mind in the region of Peel due to the fact that those that are living in poverty is growing. It's a fact of life. We as a regional council have recognized from the time Councillor Sato, when we looked at youth violence prevention in the region of Peel. And one of the first priorities that we recognized was that every school in the region of Peel had the potential to be a community center or a community hub. we have talked in the last month about the importance of community hubs and of providing funding and support for organizations to work in collaboration through a model of community hubs. We've also been hearing about the amount of children who go to school hungry, and in fact, the only meal that they may have in a day is breakfast. But the response to that within the school boards is that many of the schools now have what they call a pantry. So children that go to school that may not have food at home can go to the pantry and can go home with something for them or their brothers and sisters to eat. I mention all of these different facets because I think when we're looking at food security and we're looking at all of these different issues to deal with, it always brings me back to the fact that in every single neighborhood within the region of Peel, we have schools. And schools have the potential to be community hubs. Schools have the potential to be the safe haven for children and youth. And schools also have the potential to be the place where a teacher or someone else in the community can recognize where there's a family in distress or there's children that are not getting adequate food and substance. So I really think that as a region, and I think the commissioner has identified, as has other members of council, the importance of community hubs. But they're there. They're already there in our community, but we have to learn how to utilize them better, and we have to work in cooperation with the school boards. Because if we just go back to the schools in the community the way it was, I guess, I don't want to age myself, but when I was growing up, the school was the community hub. And it's where you went for not only education, but some of the other social priorities that you had in the community. So I really think that as we move towards developing the food charter, as we look towards dealing with housing and homelessness and poverty and community hubs, we have to sit down and have some pretty serious conversations with our school boards about opportunities for them to become the community hubs. And that's not just going to, are you saying put it in a motion? Okay, I will put it in a motion. You know, that the pieces are all there. We just have to help put them in place. And I started off by saying it always comes down to money. Well, it doesn't. If we can find alternative ways of dealing with some of these really serious social issues that we're seeing growing in our community without huge expenditures of dollars, that's where we need to be leaning. Because I think in this instance and many others, it's more human hours and human support systems that we have to ensure are in place. So I would put a motion on the floor if I really knew what it should say. So I will have to give it some thought, but I want to recognize the work, but I think more importantly, all of the pieces of the puzzle that we as a regional council are seeing in the work that we're doing, which is one of the priorities that we gave for this term of council. But it's good, it's positive. Thank you, and I will write a motion, Mr. Chairman, to put on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you for coming to delegate today. As a member of POG and as a member of this council that represents a significant agricultural community, I wanted to speak more about actually closing the loop between the producers and the consumers. So you've heard my colleagues speak about the human services aspects of the services that we provide, but I think that the Peel Food Action Council is really a great opportunity to close this loop. Many of my colleagues may not even be aware of the fact that there is almost not enough enough farmland left in Ontario to actually produce enough food to feed Ontarians. And with a growing population, this is a huge concern, and this is part of the reason why the food costs are escalating the way that they are. So bringing in and tying in the facts of our planning policies and needing to support diversified farm uses to secure and protect our agricultural lands is very important. So I just want to acknowledge the fact on behalf of the members that I sit on with POG and my agricultural community that I think that this is a really great opportunity to bring everyone together at the table, because the farmers have been saying for quite a while that this is an issue and a concern, and they've been advocating. And when policies come down provincially, whether it's the Greenbelt or the Oak Ridges Moraine or the Niagara Escarpment, it's not because of the concerns that they're taking away the land or necessarily the restrictions. It's that it almost makes it impossible for them to farm. So by breaking this awareness and ensuring that that their voice is also at this table, I think is very important, and I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to echo Councillor Innes's sentiments, I sit as Vice Chair for the Golden Horseshoe Food and Farming Alliance, and I'm sure through all of your work you have consulted with them, and I'd like to invite you to present the food charter to them. Peel is kind of the central region within the Golden Horseshoe, obviously, and I think that the mapping that we've been working on through that organization would be a great help to you, and just in terms of providing, just in terms of information sharing, really. We have great asset mapping for the food network, and even the way the food networks are integrated and serving, like our hospitals, our seniors housing, all of those things. So I think that that would be a great synergy to have as well. So I'm happy to connect that for you. And thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Councillor Parrish's comments about the food banks being involved in, not just as consultation, but actually being involved in this, because they play such an integral role in this. And in responding to Councillor Innes's comment about, we're losing all the farmland, I guess we in the totally urban area that I have one working farm left, and that's it. But I guess we're depending on our Caledon colleagues to preserve that farmland and keep it for providing food for the residents in Peel and beyond. The report, Mr. Chairman, are we bringing the report forward? Because I'd like to speak to an item in it. In the report, it refers to, and again, this refers to the food bank issue. Back in 2010, we did do a study. We brought all the food banks together around the region of Peel, and we used the Halton consultant work that they had done and led that dialogue. And it was disappointing because at the end of the day, everyone said thank you and went their own way and delivered the food services the way they had always been doing it, and did not want a collaboration, did not want a uniform distribution. Chris, you're nodding your head there. It was rather disappointing, and I think it was disappointing to staff when the results of the study came back, or the consultation came back, that that's just the way it ended up being. And you've referred to that in the report on page 3. Results indicate that the current emergency food distribution in Peel has not seen major changes or further system development since the last emergency food review completed in 2010. And that is extremely disappointing. So I guess my ask out of this whole process is that we do move to seeing a change in the food distribution system. If you take a look at the report that has the community grants, you'll see various grants for this food bank, that food bank, the Mississauga Food Bank, and all the various food banks. And they all do amazing work, and they're all very deserving. We have Compass and Eden and Save a Food Bank in Mississauga, I guess, are really the 3 largest ones. And one of the things that they are really promoting, which is in your charter, is healthy food. You know, I think we're well beyond the days when the client comes to the food bank and that they are content with, or nor should they be content with, getting the cans of beans, the pasta, the canned spaghetti sauce, and the Kraft dinner, and peanut butter. I mean, peanut butter is a really healthy food. But, you know, when the clients are coming, I know Eden, because it serves my area, they're getting fresh eggs, they're getting fresh milk, and thank you to Councillor Parrish for her fundraiser every year. All of the food banks in Mississauga are getting that fresh milk. And the clients are getting healthy vegetables, fruits. They're being taught how to cook nutritional meals. They're being given, I know at Eden, they have the program where businesses can come in and cook meals. We did it as a council, and we cooked over 200 meals one day, one afternoon. Great team building, but also those clients that came in that evening had a nice warm meal that had been prepared for them. And it was even to the extent that Councillor Mahoney, it was a gourmet meal. He was roasting spices and grinding and roasting and doing everything from scratch. So, you know, that's what the food banks are doing today. And your charter speaks to that. And I think we need to do more to expand that beyond those food banks that have taken that step. And, you know, I would hope that there's no recommendation here except to adopt the charter. But I would hope that the further recommendation would be that staff work harder through the charter, and that those of you that are involved in the charter and in the whole program, that you work to consolidate these food banks. You know, you see you've got Mississauga's different, Brampton's different, Caledon's different. Well, they're only different in the way they provide the food. They're not different really in who is needing the food and what kind of food they need and should have. So I really hope that one of the big focuses of this is not just to adopt a nice charter today and say we're all concerned about food security in Peel, because we all are, but there really is some really strong action out of this, that we're going to work together, that the three municipalities, again, staff, you're going to do your best, bring everyone together, you know, but I think maybe with the charter, this might be an opportunity to say, you know, we don't want to ask you how you want to do it. We're funding you at the Region of Peel, and we're going to tell you how we want you to do it. And, you know, I just think there have to be a lot more guidelines around that, and so that everyone does work together. But, I mean, having said that, thank you for what you have done. I guess that's the action that I really want to see moving ahead from that, because we're doing a lot of the other things in the side, but we need to be more consolidated together. Thank you.
Councillor Parrish.
Forgive me, Mr. Chairman, for speaking a second time, but I think Councillor Sato helped me pull my thoughts together in a more coherent fashion. I remember when I was on council before, we asked through Dave Schwark if we could at least have a look at pulling all the food banks together and getting them to work together. And you did give that a giant effort, and we didn't actually accomplish what we set out to do. Now we're adding another layer, another group, and it worries me. There has to be a way to pull this all together under one group, under one plan that works. Just a silly example, I was sitting in my office one day and I'm looking out my window, and we have on Wednesdays farmers market in Celebration Square. And at the end of the day, you watch these poor guys load all their stuff back in the truck. And then they have to take it and load it into refrigerators. And then the next day they have to load it back in the truck and take it somewhere. So I sent my staff down and I said, negotiate with those guys. Tell them you'll take everything they got left over for $500 every week until the end of the farmer's market. They were delirious. And the SEVA truck pulled up and they took all the vegetables, filled their coolers for 2 large food banks, one in Malton, one in Ward 6, and a couple of little food banks got baskets. So what we should be doing is there's farmers markets all over the Region of Peel. At the end of the day, negotiate, take all that stuff, put it into the local food banks. This is a kind of innovative thinking, layering charters and layering more people that are all very keen on helping people eat the right foods. It's not going to do it. And again, it's like my rant a couple weeks ago on hubs, saying, get the community to come to us and tell us how they're going to put a hub together. No, that's our job, our staff's job, is to say, this is the pattern we need for a hub who wants to join in. And we should be establishing a central hierarchy of people who are all concerned about this, not going off on little pieces and little charters and little bits and pieces all over. It just is a waste of really good people's energy. You guys work hard, the food banks are working hard. We've got thousands of volunteers across the region that are working in those food banks for nothing. They just want to help. There's got to be a way to coordinate this, make it work smoothly, waste no time, waste no food, waste no money. And that's my rant.
Thank you. David, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Parish is right. We did go away, and actually the results of the investigation that we did are in this report. And what we have found is, as the number of councillors have pointed out, is that there are a number of agencies, quite a large number of agencies across the region providing food in various ways. The region contributes about $1.7 million a year to these agencies scattered throughout the region. If council wants staff to take a much more active role in this, I would request that you put that in a motion, give us clear direction to go out. Maybe what we can do is come back to council with some recommendations about how we can coordinate the spending of that $1.7 million and work with those agencies to have a much more comprehensive, integrated approach to food distribution and PO. But these are all independent agencies with their own boards of directors, and I think it is a large undertaking. It will be a large undertaking, but certainly one that we're willing to take on if council gives us that direction.
Well, what I'd like to do, and I guess Councillor Sato may have her own thought, I'd like to craft it so that we come back at a future meeting that it's written in a way that staff thinks might actually work, and do it in such a way as you can explain to all these groups that at $1.7 million and all the money they collect, if you could take that amount of money and channel it appropriately with no duplication, we could really make a difference. So I will serve it as a notice of motion today, and Pat and I will craft one for the next meeting, and thank you.
Thanks for your help there, David. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to emphasize and echo what Councillor Sato and Councillor Parish have just said in terms of consolidation and collaboration with the food banks and the agencies. In the past 3 weeks alone, I've had 4 different groups come to me that offer food, that have asked me for how can they coordinate and collaborate either with other agencies or with food banks. What mostly they're looking for is actually storage and a location. Breakfast with Santa, which is over 40 years old, provides basically, and they're completely volunteer. They work out of Maria Esteva's house. There's no storage. Her entire house basically is storage. She provides, in terms of breakfast program, it's all fresh food and it's all volunteers, and it went from being a summer program and something around Christmas time for families. It's now basically 365 days a year they're offering breakfast programs at schools. Very successful, but they're lacking that collaboration, consolidation. Boys and Girls Club, same thing, have come to me. They offer snacks and a lunch. I've tried to connect them with Breakfast with Santa. One of the challenges, the price point to offer that fresh food, that fresh snack or fresh lunch or meal. Salvation Army, they've come to me as well, and one of the things they've done to try to come up with a solution is work with a trucking company to have an actual transport one of the containers on their site to store food, because they don't have, there's no space. They have nowhere, they've been looking, they can't find space, and also Knight's Table. So just in the past 3 weeks, those 3 different groups have come to me to say we need consolidation in terms of volunteers and resources. they're putting in thousands and thousands of hours of volunteer time, as Councillor Sato and Councillor Parrish have reflected, but there has to be a way that we can consolidate between the food banks and these organizations and the region of Peel, because they're offering all this. The last thing we would want is for one of these groups that is actually providing that service to not be able to operate anymore. And if it's just a matter of the coordination. So I just wanted to echo what has already been said by Councillor Sato and Councillor Parrish, but to say that it seems to be coming at more of an alarming rate from the different agencies, and I think to coordinate them with the food banks it's essential. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm just gathering my thoughts here. The group that has been working and developed the Peel Food Charter Working Group, I think we may be underestimating the value of the work that they have done so far. And if you piggyback that on the comments made by Councillor Parrish in regards to a coordinated approach to ensuring that we're getting the best bang for our dollar, and also coordinating and making sure that we coordinate the delivery of food, we should be working off the work that has already begun with this group. I know a charter sounds kind of like a nice thing, but normally charters are simply a way to get different groups and organizations to make a commitment to what it is you're trying to do. And certainly the Food Action Working Group, what they're trying to do is ensure that everybody in the region of Peel have food security. And that's the very same thing as Councillor Parrish is talking about, and it's the very same thing as we all are talking about. So I don't want to underestimate the value of the work that has already been done, the outreach to the different community groups and organizations, and certainly a Peel Food Action Council could be the organization that has the mandate to ensure that we do have a coordinated approach to providing food, that we do have a network of organizations that are allowed to work, that not are allowed, but that are working together. It's also a way for the region of Peel to ensure that the dollars that we are putting into organizations and agencies that are responsible for feeding those in need in our community, that again, there's no duplication and that we're getting the best bang for our buck. So I don't want to leave the group that has worked very hard on bringing this forward to us. I don't want them to leave feeling that we're disappointed in the work that you've done or not recognizing the importance of what it is that you've been working on, because I think it is really important. If we're to reach our priorities as a region of Peel, we want to ensure that, our most vulnerable population do have the amount of food that they need. So if we are going to look at a direction where we want to have a coordinated approach to food, if we want to have a network of organizations that are dealing with this, I would think that the Peel Working Group, that has the Peel Food Working Group, the Peel Food Charter Working Group, sorry, is the group. They've started it. They're asking for our support and endorsement. I think the work that's been asked for from Councillor Parrish, the place that should land is with this group of people. So I put that out there. I'm happy to support the recommendations in the report, But I do think that there's been valuable discussion around the table, and we certainly, all of us, probably have the same kind of concerns about how much is enough, how do we make sure we're utilizing regional dollars in the West in the best way possible. And we now have a group, or will have a group, that can take a look at making sure the broader needs of the region of Peel have an umbrella organization, which is what we're saying. So I would support the recommendation, and if we do have, when the motion comes from Councillor Parrish and Councillor Sato, there may be the opportunity through the working group, with the support of staff who are already part of that group, to actually carry out the recommendations that council has.
All right, good. Thank you.
Oh, and I have a motion. Sorry. The motion that Councillor Downey had requested in...
Actually, I'll take it, there's still some speakers, so
Okay.
I'll go through the list and then we'll take it in
Okay.
order. Thanks.
Thank
Janice, I think you had a comment?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I do like to remind council that we are not the service system manager when it comes to food security. So we don't have a legislative ability to direct organizations in the way in which they operate. We are hoping that in the spirit of working together and collaboration, that food organizations will come together as part of the Peel Food Action Council and help us build a very sustainable food system. Having said that, we do have an ability to influence organizations when we are funding them through the Community Investment Program. So there is a tool available to council there for those organizations who do receive that funding. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Sato?
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that we don't direct the fund, we don't direct what they do, but we do fund. And this is the issue that Councillor Parrish and I have been raising for quite a few years, and that I raised back 2010, I guess it was, when I asked for the groups to come together and use the Halton consulting model, because they had done all the work for us. But as I said, nothing happened from that. And, so 7 years later, we're still in the same position that we were before, with everyone doing their own thing. And I guess one of my questions, Mr. Chairman, is this is an initiative of the Peel Poverty Reduction Strategy Committee. Do the food banks sit on that committee?
Yes.
And Chris is saying no, staff are saying yes. So part of my concern, and two of us on this side of the room raised the concern several times, is, Councillor Miles, if you're asking a group, a committee, to do the work that we have asked that be done, but no one from the providers sits on the committee, then I have a real concern with that. So when the motion comes forward, we will make sure that it is worded in such a way, because I have no problem with the Peel Poverty Reduction Strategy group, the work being directed through there, because that is appropriate. And I want to recognize Edna Toth, God bless you, Edna, in the audience today, has probably done more in making everyone around the region aware and in supporting people who are in need, not just with food, but housing and everything else. And you have absolutely done a phenomenal job, Edna, and you continue to do so. I've known you for over 30 years, and you were just as active back 30 years ago as you are today. But I do have a concern, Councillor Miles, with giving an organization that does not include the key stakeholders a role of making those decisions. I think it is a region of Peel. We are the funder, and I think we need to get some really strong criteria. I'm not suggesting we stop funding. We would never stop funding. But we need to be sure, for our taxpayers and for the clients, for those that need the food, we need to be sure that every penny of that money is being directed in the most responsible way possible. And that's our job as regional staff for you and regional councillors for us. So when we will bring the motion forward, and I think we will have a lot of discussion over the next week between Councillor Parrish and myself as to who we're going to recommend that should be doing the work, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Well, I guess I heard differently from staff, that there was collaboration with the food banks, and in fact, Councillor Sato, I haven't finished speaking, that there was consultation, and in fact, that the food banks would be asked to be part of the food action group.
Through the chair. So we do have representation from the food banks on our committee, but it's voluntary. If they want to step forward and be part of the committee, they can be.
You know what? I don't know why we're arguing about this. It doesn't really make any difference. I think anybody who has an interest and wants to be part of this, we would welcome them with open arms, and I look forward to the motion that you bring. My motion is just a little bit different that Councillor Downey has encouraged me to put on the floor, and it's simple. If we could put it up. So I guess I'll just read it. Whereas the Region of Peel is responsible for housing, homelessness, poverty, vulnerable populations, children and seniors, and public health, and whereas community hubs can provide a way to serve our growing population in a model of collaboration, and whereas there is a school in every neighborhood in Peel, therefore be it resolved that the Region of Peel pursue opportunities to have community hubs with our school board partners. This is the old motion. I'm reading the wrong one. Sorry.
Read from the screen. It's been
Okay.
updated again.
And, yeah, included in that there was, therefore be it resolved that the food charter be introduced to the schools in Peel, and request that the school boards of Peel adopt the food charter. And I think that may be a way in the door to ensure that, at the very least, every school in Peel has a pantry.
If I may, through the chair, I just wanted to thank all the various councillors' comment, and want to remind the councillors that the food security is more than just about emergency food services. And that's what the food charter is trying to communicate. It's to communicate a collective vision for what food security is like in a community. And it takes more than just food banks, it takes schools, it takes hubs, it takes everyone and all the stakeholders across the sectors to work together. And like what Councillor Parrish was mentioning, it's not meant to put a layer on it, but it's to provide a collective vision so that everyone can work together towards that vision together.
Okay, thank you. I have, the first motion would be the report, the recommendation within the report of, it's 9.3, and if Councillor Miles, if you'd move that, and Councillor Ennis, if you'd second that. Okay, so that's a recorded vote, please. It's in reference to 9.3. That motion carries. And the second motion, it's up on the screen, that was moved by Councillor Miles, second by Councillor Downey. I'll take it as read. That's a recorded vote as well, please. And that motion carries. I want to thank both of you ladies as well as your group for the work that you've done to date in the development of the food, or the Peel Food Charter, and the creation of a Peel Food Action Council. And you've heard from council today, and they've just approved those motions. So it's been a good day for you. And
Thank
Councillor
you very
Parrish
much.
has put a notice of motion on that. We can deal with that, Councillor Parrish, in the next council meeting on the 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more delegation. Laura Zilny, Chief Executive Officer, Hope 24/7, requesting additional funding for Hope 24/7, an accredited community-based mental health organization. And it's in reference to item 9.2. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Can I begin? Well, thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I really appreciate your time. I'm here to talk about Hope 24/7, and what we're asking from the region is for your advocacy through Fair Share Peel to assist us in getting $1 per capita in core funding. So just to give you some context for those who don't know about Hope 24/7, we've been serving Peel Region since 1993. We are an accredited community health agency through Accreditation Canada, which is the same body that accredits hospitals, long-term care homes, and very large mental health facilities. And we serve all of Peel Region, and we're a trauma agency working with all persons 12 years of age and older. And in addition to that, we are the designated sexual assault center for the region of Peel by the province of Ontario, which is what brings me here today. The province of Ontario, through the Ministry of the Attorney General, is our predominant funder. And our funding has been lagging other sexual assault centers across the province, so much so that we're getting only 3% of what the average sexual assault center receives. So to give you some broader context, we know, as a trauma-serving agency, we know that research is very clear that 70 to 90% of individuals will experience multiple lifetime traumas, and these can be the death of a loved one, or it can be a sexual assault or intimate partner violence, the things that we deal with. We also know that there's a shrinking middle class and that increasing poverty is becoming the norm. And the situation that we're relying on is, with our funding deficits, we're asking our service users to start to pay for services. Well, when we couple that with poverty and the growing levels of poverty, it's becoming an increasingly challenging situation. Kind of the underneath layer of that, beyond the Ministry of the Attorney General lack of funding, is we have the uncertainty of the United Way. We're also a United Way funded agency. They've merged with Toronto York, and the funding is uncertain there. We've had reductions in our funding as well that are recommended through the region. And so we're in a dire situation. Our staff are working at beyond capacity. We're usually about 45% beyond capacity each year. And so the situation is really dire. And so we're here to ask for council to help us to advocate to the province for that fair share in funding. And how we ascertained where we are in terms of our funding is through asking through the Freedom of Information process, to find out what are other sexual assault centers getting, what is the funding formula, how is it developed, and what we found is there's no funding formula. It's all historically based, and it seems to be based more on the ridings, which ridings are more relevant in different election cycles, and those organizations seem to be getting increasing funding. And so what it leaves us, again, is at 34 cents per capita. 71% of the other sexual assault centers receive over $1 per capita, with the most funded organization receiving over $76 per capita. So there's huge disparities within this realm. Overlaid with our funding situation is Peel's increasing population. So we know that over a 10-year period, the population increased by almost 18%, and our funding remained virtually static. So in essence, that meant that our funding was actually clawed back, and we had to work with a lot less money with substantially more individuals to serve. And right now, we serve about 5,000 individuals a year. And these are regulated health professionals, so we have occupational therapists, social workers, psychotherapists on staff, and then prevention and outreach folks that are skilled in education, community development, that type of work. So what is the risk to the community? You may have read the Toronto Star article several months ago about our situation. what we're doing is we're pushing our wait list up to the better funded organizations. And this doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. From a client-centered perspective, it doesn't make sense to do that. But more importantly, from a financial perspective, it doesn't make sense to do that either. To send somebody to a hospital because of a mental health issue, they're not going to get the best service, and it's going to cost exponentially more money than if we were to just absorb them and be properly funded within our organization. So to give you a concrete, to walk into the hospital emergency room, just to walk in, not to be triaged, is just over $1,200. To complete a full regimen of clinical intervention where individuals are back to school, they're back to work, they're engaged in their communities again, is under $800. So just from a cost-benefit analysis, it makes good sense to do this. But there's more risk attached to it. Individuals are staying in relationships longer. Youth are getting trafficked into the sex trade. There's increased self-harming behavior. Again, think hospital visits. There's increased criminal justice involvement, especially if we look at male and male-identified individuals. They tend to hold things in a little bit longer, and it comes out in other realms. So we're having all of these situations explode, and we're now in a dire situation. And so I've provided some background materials in the appendices for you to review, because one of the questions that I always get is, well, maybe funding is based on performance. And so I asked that very question too through the Freedom of Information process and found we're outperforming other sexual assault centers by light years. This is a true gem. Hope 24/7 ranks in the top 5% in the country for mental health programming for trauma. We are the center of excellence, and we're located in Peel, and what we're here to do is to ask council to support us through the fair share effort to get that $1 per capita in core funding, which would bring our budget from $459,000 to approximately $1.4 million. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'd stay in place, Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you. I got on the board because I thought I was going to have to refer you back to staff, but your ask is probably one that every single social service agency in the region of Peel would be asking for. And I think it's fair to say that absolutely, when we are advocating for fair share for Peel, the organization that's been around for 25 plus years, you're included in the need in our community. It's interesting, here at the region, we've tried to backfill as best we can and recognize the struggles that the sector is experiencing. Just over 10 years ago, the Community Investment Grant Fund was $500,000. The recommendation in this report is $6.8 million. I think the region has stepped up and done probably more than our fair share, and certainly more than what we need to or should need to do in the community. The interesting part was that of the 6.8 million, that doesn't represent the ask. The ask is almost 10 million. And the one thing that I think the region did a really exceptional job on was when we redesigned our community grant program in collaboration with other funders in the region. It's interesting to see United Way on the list because they're supposed to be a funder. Not sure where that fits into the whole picture, but their role, through the process that we went through was to fund a program, and the region's role was to fund capacity building to help agencies become more sustainable, raise funding on their own rather than having to come back to the region. We're not a sustainable source of funding, but in terms of your ask, it's an easy ask. I think we're doing it already through our support, and we tried to, through Councillor Parrish, tried to put together a forum to bring all of the groups together. It didn't, the stars didn't line up on that, but there were probably most of us, if not all, around this table ready to roll up our sleeves and send the message loud and clear that Peel is not being treated fairly. A number of years ago, I remember United Way coming forward, and I said, we need to stop putting together statistics, stop updating the numbers, stop, you know, with the real-life stories that are coming out of our community, and just ask a very simple question of the province. Why? Why is Peel and the municipalities that make it up not getting our fair share? Put the ball back in their court. You know, every local politician in our 3 municipalities are on the same page as you are. It's our federal and provincial partners that aren't. You know, they acknowledge it, but I'm not seeing a whole heck of a lot of heavy lifting at their end. You just look at agencies like Peel Children's Aid, you know, and the growing demand in our community, and they are one of the poorest, if not the poorest, funded children's aid society in the province. It's just unacceptable, and we deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Well, it wasn't that the stars didn't align, it was because Fair Share for Peel no longer exists. It's an outdated website, it doesn't exist. So we tried to put a summit together, and we spent hours and hours and hours with a lot of people, staff from all the municipalities that are part of Peel, and we could not track the money. The best trackers we had of money were organizations like you. The health organizations did a very good job. The school boards did a very good job, but all the other money was buried. For example, immigration settlement used to come out of the federal government in a lump sum to the province distributed it. You could follow the strings. It doesn't happen anymore. The feds now fund a group in a province, another group in the same province, and there's no way to track it because it's all under confidentiality. So we didn't give up because the stars didn't align. We gave up because, as a responsible group, we didn't want to humiliate the provincial and federal governments, particularly in a provincial government election year, look like a bunch of hokey characters that didn't have their numbers lined up. But the reason we didn't have the numbers lined up is we didn't have organizations like yours doing an incredibly good job. I have a couple questions. The $459,000 that you function on, where does that money come from?
That's through the victim surcharges, fines, when you pay a fine, and that's through the Ministry of the Attorney General.
And that's all you get?
Yes.
That's your whole funding. So you don't apply for any grants through our grant system of the $6 million?
We get some through the Community Investment Fund, and then we get some through United Way as well.
And how much did you get last year from the Community Investment Fund?
It was approximately $88,000.
So that's part of your 459?
No, sorry, as an entire agency, the budget is approximately $700,000.
Okay,
About $60,000 comes from service user fees.
it's too bad that you have to charge people because most of the people coming to you can't afford it. There's no mystery as to why your money hasn't increased. Everything was stalled in 2001. That was the one theme we got in most of the organizations we looked at, was they had an amount that was increasing per capita with population growth. 2001 came along, Mike Harris came along, and everything was frozen. Even silly things like library services, they're still based in Mississauga on 300,000 population. We've doubled that. So I understand your problem. I thought you were coming today to ask for money. I would have moved the money, and I would have suggested we send an invoice to the province, to the Ministry of the Attorney General for the amount that we give you, but you didn't ask us for money. Maybe next time you will. This is, again, I mean, the frustration I experienced over months of work, and David Arbuckle was our absolute saint on trying to get the numbers. It's very frustrating. And for us to sit back, particularly in an election year, and say, okay, you guys hid the money well enough that we can't really take you on with factual numbers. We can take you on something like this. So I don't know what we do about this. I don't know what you do about this. It is one of the most frustrating things I've ever looked at. I had experienced the same frustration with dental care. We brought in a seniors dental program that's saving the province probably millions of dollars because people are getting their teeth fixed. In emergency situations, seniors, they're not getting heart attacks, they're not getting other medical problems because they actually can chew food. So I don't know if we decide that we've got to add more money to that community fund and give groups like you more money and then start sending the invoices to the province, copy to the Toronto Star. I don't know what we do, but I'm going to take you on as a project. I'm going to do a little bit of research on this and see what we can do to stir up the pot and make a little bit of trouble for a few politicians that all want to get reelected this year. So you're not asking me for money today, so I can't move a motion to give you money. But I sure as hell would like to. So you and I are going to talk.
And Councilor Parish, I would be pleased to send a letter to the Attorney General with respect to the concerns that have been raised here. as
Councillor
well.
Daryl, you're a doll, and it'll go into the same garbage can
Well,
all our other
At least
letters
we're on
go
record.
into.
I'm just trying to help.
Well, no, we got to do something far more dramatic.
No, I
That's-
just start, just to help the assist.
I don't know, we go to Queen's Park and protest, I don't know what we do, but I had a plan, it was a great plan, we were putting $90,000 into that summit, we just couldn't get the numbers, and you can't fault the staff at the region or our local staffs for not being able to come up with those numbers. David Arbuckle, who has just walked in, Saint Arbuckle, had everybody working on the numbers. We couldn't, with integrity, specifically say, this is where we're being shortchanged in all these departments. So it would have been irresponsible of us to put on a big summit, make a lot of noise, cause a lot of trouble, and end up with egg on our faces. So it wasn't stars aligning, it was we couldn't get what we needed to do a good job. And as you all know, in Peel, we don't do a half-assed job. So I'm going to help you. I don't know how, but I'm going to help you.
Councilor Yanika.
Thank you. Well, in the 30 years I've been around, there's nothing that makes me want to beat my head against the wall more than the Peel Fair Share file. I have an idea, and I was going to bring it up at council. We're almost out of ideas, but you've got to keep fighting. You don't have a choice. The bad news is next year there's a provincial and municipal election, only about 4 months apart. That's the good news. And I have a template in my head that I think it's time for, because I'm sure a lot of you are running into it as well. It's a communique to all of our constituents that say, in this year, there's a municipal and provincial election. If your question is, why isn't the snow being plowed? Be sure to call your councillor or mayor. If your question is just about everything else on the file, be sure to ask your MPP and the premier. And it's time to do that. And it was something I was going to bring up yesterday at our council, and I know we have the committee here that deals with intergovernmental issues, but the list of, and if it's why you're only valued at 1/6 on the dollar for everything Peel Fair, be sure to ask the candidates that want to be MPPs at your door and the ones that want to be premier. And if you're asking why our hospitals, be sure to, and do it on both sides. And we look forward as the one seeking public office to your questions. Most recently, again, one of the big ones that I have, another gentleman was speaking to me this past week, why is education on my property tax bill? And I said, great question, be sure to ask everybody that's running provincially on June 8th. So, Mr. Chairman, it's almost a fool's game in some senses, but it's the only game in town. The data speaks for itself. We've been screwed over for decades. We're not worth 1/6 what everybody else is worth in the region of Peel and in our cities. And let's take advantage of this opportunity, to be blunt, Carolyn, to embarrass them a little bit. That's all we got left. Say, here's the raw data. Please be sure to ask all of us, locally, regionally, and provincially, what our role is, and you're entitled to some answers. And so maybe a discussion for another day, but perhaps there is a motion or direction in that. Are we going to have a discussion at some point as what is going to be our communication strategy leading into 2018 and the multiple elections going forward? I would like to move that as a direction to staff, and we should have a discussion around it around the appropriate committee. And with respect to Mayor McCallion, she sort of had a similar idea years ago that it's election time, how are we going to put their feet to the fire? I love the idea of being able to do it for both of us, because we're all up for re-election. So something along that theme, because otherwise we just throw up our hands again for all the good that it's gotten us. Remember Brad Butt coming here all those years and all the work he did for Peel and so many other people. And what good did it get us? But you got to keep fighting. And I appreciate Councillor Moore's comment. And in our, we've raised 10 times what we give now. It's going to get worse because we've been abandoned. This is the time to hold their feet and our own to the fire. So thank you for coming. We've got to storm the barricades one more time, and I think this is the year to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll take that as direction to
Thank you.
staff to come back to the appropriate
Thank you.
committee.
Yeah.
Janice, do you have a comment?
Thank you. Through the chair, I did want to just highlight that in 2018, we are doing a detailed review of the community investment plan to determine whether we believe additional funding is required. But not to mislead council, we don't intend to change the intent of the plan, of the program, which is still to enhance organizational infrastructure, strengthen business processes, and build collaboration, not to cover off shortfalls in funding from the province. If I may, I just wanted to take the opportunity as well to explain why the United Way is receiving funding, because it was raised as a question. I saw some heads nodding. The United Way receives funding as a lead agency only, so they flow funding through to the Peel Newcomer Strategy Group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Chair Dale. Yes, Laura, thank you for being here. You presented at the City of Mississauga, and you took the time to meet with me. And even though you showed me, which just emphasized the frustration that Peel has had in terms of not getting its fair share over many, many years, you still, in the time that you met with me, you still agreed to find ways to collaborate with agencies within the municipalities, local municipalities, and the region of Peel. And maybe that's what we're doing wrong. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And to Councillor Parrish and Councillor Unica's point, maybe we do need to do something much more severe, because, I mean, the data that's here just shows that, you know, it's glaring. It's glaring. I know Legal Aid, Mississauga Legal Clinic, same thing. They're coming forward and showing this type of data, and you're doing the work to show the data. And that's wonderful. I just want to say thank you for being here, and I think it's really important from, not that we're not already aware, but having this data in front of us is really important. And to Janice's point about just having an overarching system or model or some sort of tool that organizations can use to collaborate their data if they're willing to do so, that might be something that could be included when you're looking at the community resources. We've had today a number of presentations, and I think when it comes to collaboration and coordination, that's one of the things that these organizations and agencies are asking for. So I just want to say thank you for being here, and I think the data that you've pulled together is helpful for us when we're going down to the province or to the federal government to ask for more funding. Thank you.
And I too would like to thank you on behalf of council, and certainly you can see that we're all strong advocates for your cause, and we'll continue the fight.
Thank you very much for your time.
We'll bring forward the report and ask that if Councillor Moore would move it and Councillor Fonseca second the receipt of the report. No, the report's for information. Receipt of the delegation and the report, 9 point. Okay, we'll move the delegation then. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Suggest that we go through the consent agenda, and then we'll break for lunch and come back. So we'll start with 7.1 and 2 were dealt with, I believe. Communication 8.1. Pull 8.1. Okay. 9.1 is a presentation, so we'll hold that. 10.1?
No, 9.2.
Oh, 2, sorry, 9.2, yeah. Apologies. Okay, we'll hold that. 10.1? Consent, yes. 11.1? Consent. 11.2? Consent. 11.3? Consent. 11.4? Okay, we'll hold that. 11.5? Consent. Communications, 12.1? Consent. 12.2? Consent. 12.3? Consent. 12.4? Consent. 12.5, consent. 13.1 was dealt with. 13.2. consent. 14.1. Consent. And that's it, I guess, 15.1. Yeah, 15.1 will hold? Okay. All right, that takes us through it. And then we'll break for lunch and come back and, sorry, recorded vote. My apologies, recorded vote on the consent first, sorry. Okay, thank you, that carries. Okay. We'll reconvene now. Items related to health. Councillor Moore, if you'd chair this section, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only item left on, actually, I think it was Councillor Parrish that asked that this matter be held, and she's not. No, this is the letter from Dr. Eric Hoskins, Minister of Health, on additional base funding. So I'm going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, you move to the next section
Yeah, we'll hold
and come
that.
back. Oh, here she comes.
All right. 8.1, Councillor Parrish.
Yes, boss. I can't find it. Okay, I'm ready.
You ready?
Yes.
Great.
When I read the report, it says, I'm pleased to advise you that it's going to provide up to $4,986,544. How much did we actually get?
Through the chair, if I may, I know Peter is not here. What we've received is exactly what we asked for from the province. So the province is funding fully at 50% of the eligible costs for paramedic services. So this matches the budget request that was submitted.
Okay,
I don't know the total off the top of my head, though.
Okay, because this is almost 5 million. Did we get 2.5 million?
The overall funding is probably in the neighborhood of $40 or $50 million for
Really?
paramedic services. They pay 50% of the total program costs.
If I can interject.
Yes, you may.
This is for
Sorry.
ambulances.
I understand that, and I suggested this morning to Peter Dundas that this really wasn't clear. I didn't know whether this was a good newsletter or, when it talks about additional funding. We do get a significant amount of money. This was what we projected we would get in additional funding. So the province is really just announcing that we got the additional funding that we had budgeted for, that to recognize growth. David, are you looking at me like you want to? So this, this isn't more money than we thought we were going to get.
So it's just
It's already incorporated.
typical provincial re-announcing.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
say that where staff can't, yes.
Okay, I said it. Thank you, move receipt.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried, thank you.
Items related to
Oh,
human.
do we have to, no, okay.
Items related to human services. Councilor Medeiros, if you chair this section, please.
Yes, thank you. So our first, members of council, first item before you is an update on homelessness in Peel. Yes. Please, with Grace Caron, Director of Client Relationships and Client and Community Access.
Good afternoon, Chair Dale and members of Regional Council. Today's presentation accompanies the report included in your agenda package entitled Update on Homelessness in Peel. Our data provides us with good information on current usage, and combined with the research we have undertaken and our knowledge of best practices, highlights the need for a system redesign. I'm going to hand it over in a moment to Grace Caron, the Acting Director for Community Access in the Human Services Department. Community Access works closely with the community partners and housing services to offer a range of homelessness programs across the region. Grace is going to briefly outline the state of homelessness services, key observations, and next steps. Grace?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Since the opening of our first shelter in 2000, the region has provided a wide range of supports and services designed to prevent and respond to homelessness in Peel. Through the intervening years, we've worked closely with our community partners and with the support of Council to respond to the changing needs of the homeless community and work to focus on prevention and stabilization with the addition of transitional support programs and eviction prevention programs. Over the past couple of years, we've seen an increase in the needs of our community, which are outpacing what's available in the system. Emergency shelters are close to or exceeding capacity on a consistent basis. The region's population growth is certainly a factor, but it is not the only driver of this increasing demand. An increase in both length of stay and residents returning to shelters show us that both chronic homelessness and episodic homelessness is on the rise in our community. Affordability and availability of housing are two factors to this trend, but it also indicates that stabilizing supports after shelter stays are need enhancing. A number of operational changes have been made within the shelter system to manage the increasing demands and to influence return rates to the shelters. Some of these include realigning staff to shelters to assist discharged residents retain their housing, working with our contracted service providers and community agencies to assess residents' vulnerability and identify those who require more intensive supports, and then matching those supports to their needs. And using our enhanced data available through our new technology to better identify trends earlier on and to plan for future state to better meet needs. We've seen some progress with these efforts, as 2017 data to date is showing a decrease over 2016 lengths of stay in some of the shelters. However, we are still trending above 2015 length of stay rates. Although we have seen an increase in the need for shelter services, there are several things that have remained consistent over these last years. In our single shelters, the average age of resident is 40 years old, and 37 years old is the average age of our shelter residents, heads of households for families. This has been consistent over the last 3 years. For the family shelter, we don't actually break down residents by male and female, but rather report on total number of families and dependents. But for our Cawthra Road shelter, which is for all males and females, we have a resident breakdown of 53% males, 39% females, and 8% undisclosed or other in 2007 to date. This also remains consistent over the past 3 years for males and females, with the greatest increase in the undisclosed or other gender. The most common reason for adults seeking shelter remains consistent with family relationship breakdowns for singles and housing eviction for families. We know from our work with the community, and as Council heard this morning, a designated women's shelter and safe spaces are two areas of a subsegment population that are in need. LGBTQ2, as well as an older population who are seeking shelters, along with the women's issues, will be examined further as part of the 10-year Peel Housing and Homelessness refresh, as these are service groups that need to inform future program plans. As Council is aware, on January 30th of this year, the Queen Street Youth Shelter opened as an immediate short-term solution to the lack of a dedicated youth shelter in Brampton. The program was designed for 30-bed occupancy, but we've quickly exceeded that, with 86% of the time us having more than 30 residents. Similar to the trends seen in the adult system, the demand is exceeding the capacity, and our length of stay is fairly consistent with Our Place Peel in Mississauga. 53% of the youth returned to the shelter more than twice in this last 10 months, and the average age of our youth in the shelter is 20 years old. The primary reasons for youth seeking shelter mirror those with the adult system, which is family relationship breakdown and loss of housing. There have been a number of challenges encountered with the operations of the youth shelter. The number of youth, coupled with the physical layout of the facility, have led to adjustments in our operating procedures and increased staffing and security on site. Through 2018 budget process, we requested increasing our capacity at the shelter by 10 beds. To address the current overflow issue, when the shelter maximum exceeds capacity of 40 residents, we will identify those older residents, meaning those 22, 23, and 24 years old, with a lower acuity score, meaning they are determined to have lower needs, and relocate them within the existing adult shelter system, where youth-specific needs will be available. Staff and community partners are working closely, ongoing, to address the issues for residents, staff, and the neighboring communities. Families First is a recovery-oriented approach to ending homelessness that centers on quickly moving people into independent and permanent housing first, and then providing additional supports and services as needed. And this is reported to be the most effective way to address homelessness with leading practice. This is in some ways counter to the way our current shelter systems were designed, where we provide holistic supports and services in the facility. This was once an effective way to reduce the length of stay in the shelter system, but at this point in time, leading practices indicate that this could contribute to the normalizing of shelter stay, which is a concern for not only adults in the shelter system, but even particularly more so for our youth. We have begun to shift to a housing first approach with some operational changes that we've discussed earlier, as well as new programs underway focused on prevention, stability, and diversion. The 10-year Housing and Homelessness Plan refresh will be reporting back to Council in early 2018, which will address the full housing continuum, of which homelessness is a subsystem of. The broader plan will be a foundational roadmap for our future work in the area of homelessness. In addition to this broader plan, we'll be undertaking a homeless system redesign in 2018. This will look at not only a tactical plan for the current program's shift to a housing first approach, but also include plans to address those gaps identified. By Q1 2019, we plan to have a multi-year action plan for the homelessness system. This multi-year plan will ladder up to the housing development plan for long-term investment and planning as part of the larger housing system. A youth homelessness specific response will be reported back in early 2018 as well, with recommendation on the number and composition of permanent beds that are being added to the system, which will be developed over the 2018-2019 year. In the interim, we continue to work with our community partners and stakeholders to ensure that the current shelters and programs meet the needs of our community, and we will continue to strive to be flexible and responsive to this challenging and important issue our community faces. Thank you. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, and such important work at a critical time, especially with a lot of research that's come out, the recent United Way report, and the income inequalities, and certainly homelessness is really much one of those features. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but a comment. And I know that the way Council made the decision to open this homeless shelter was a little unconventional in terms of how we generally sort of build it into our budget, build it into our work plans, and so on. This was really done at lightning speed, and that there was, you know, I have to say, staff did an outstanding job of pulling it all together, the whole team that had to come together to make it happen. And I know that when we talked about opening it initially, we talked about essentially kind of triaging the young people when they came through the door to break the cycle. And I think we're probably going to say this in different ways, but I think you said it, is that if once we have an established pattern, it's going to be a lot more difficult to change it. I'm glad that you've, you know, that the Housing First initiative or approach is going to be used, we probably should have been more ready with that at the beginning, and we should be putting some resources into identifying potential places in the community so that they are not all clustered in one area of the region or in one neighborhood, so that when we do have a young person that is receptive to either being reunified with their family or whatever that, housing option might look like for them, it does concern me that the longer we go where the operation of it just seems like a different location for younger people, but it's the same as the homeless shelter where they sort of cycle through and keep returning back. Once that becomes the norm, it's going to be hard when they show up and we go, well, now we're going to sit down and talk about what your future looks like, and it doesn't look like returning back to this address. So I just put that out there. I know that, and that's why I acknowledged right at the beginning, there's this sort of unconventional way, but when I see an average length of stay of 10 days, what would that 10 days look like for that young people? That young person, are they leaving through the day and coming back? Are they staying there? Are there programs there for them? What has been the, I guess, the attitude of those young people in terms of reaching out and wanting some support?
Yeah, the experiences are as varied as the number of youth who have gone through, but there is programming on site. It was very important, and we work with not only Our Place Peel, but Elizabeth Fry, as well as the Salvation Army and other youth-serving agencies to ensure that there's programming available on site. Some youth leave for work or school or otherwise. Some attend programming on site or in weekends. It really is an individualized approach based on what that youth needs. We very early started shifting the youth shelter to a housing first approach because you're exactly right. It's about not normalizing that shelter stay. And that definitely will be part of our broader planning when we look at the long-term youth action plan that comes back. It's not just about shelters. In fact, that should be probably the smallest component of the plan, with lots of a whole breadth of system of supports and services that have to be in place.
Perfect.
If I may, so I think that we do support the youth that come in. There is a lot of programming on site and the appropriate staff are there. Some of the issue may be that this is just a temporary solution. And so we'll be looking at whether it would be better to have a shelter that has a blend of emergency beds and transitional beds, because we see the same youth coming back again and again.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. It's appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Downey?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, Grace, for the presentation, and thank you for hosting us. Councillor Medeiros and I had the opportunity to tour the shelter last month, along with other service providers in Peel. There's a striking difference between Peel Youth Village and the shelter. So I'm wondering if maybe you can speak to the normalization a little bit more, just to give my colleagues a little bit more information there. The shelter is not a happy, friendly place. The staff are, but it's not a comfortable place to be.
No.
And there's a reason for that.
Yes.
And I think it's an important reason. And if we could get all of the youth that are coming into the shelter into programs like we offer at Peel Youth Village, I think that would be fantastic. As well, I'm wondering if you could also expand a little bit on what the diversion looks like when the youth come in and we don't have space for them, or getting them reacquainted with the families. The work that happens surrounding those pieces, I think, is important as well for everyone to hear.
Certainly, yes. So in terms of the shelter, yeah, it isn't a happy place. It's a interim measure that staff have done a remarkable job with, and our service providers do a remarkable job with. But it's not intended to be a home or even replicate a home or a community in any way. And it really is about intended to be short-term stay and then linked to supports. We know from research and leading practices, as particularly with youth, the very best outcome is to connect people back to their families, and that we can successfully, in fact, reintegrate youth back to their families, in many cases with the right level of supports and services, and it really is about a holistic approach. So it's about having the front door open to allow people in, but making sure the back door is open to facilitate the exit as well, and ensure that it's not perceived as being home or comfortable or a frat house or anything thereof. It is a shelter with supports and services on site. In terms of diversion, we're just starting to develop our diversion strategies, but and a formalized diversion strategy as part of as a part of Housing First approach. But part of diversion is, and we'll be looking at in 2018, coordinated access. So one central point that people, like when they identify they're at risk of homelessness, and how do we then divert them back to either stable housing within the community or otherwise. The diversion that we're taking in the youth shelter is related to those older adults when we start to get past the 40 occupants on site. And that is, we're going to direct those older with lower needs youth to the adult shelter system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Downey. There's no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Councillor Moore moves receipt, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Our next item is 9.2, Community Investment Program Update. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Parrish.
Okay, I've got a splitting headache, so my brain is not working. I just finally found some good drugs, Advil, but they're not working yet. What is the difference when you go through these pages between Community Investment Program allocations, which seem to be 2017, then there's a little one called Organizational Effectiveness Program allocations, that's also 2017, and then there's sustainability in 2018. Can somebody explain to me, do we add all those up in a group?
So, through the chair, we are just giving you information on the 2017 allocations, and we're asking for your recommended approval of the 2018.
So the 2017's already happened?
You already approved them.
When?
Last year.
Last year. I wasn't paying attention, obviously. Okay, one of the things I think we asked for before was more detail. These little boxes, I could sit and write 20 of them for you, and you'd love my applications. These little agency mandate focus boxes are not really giving us as much detail as I'd like, but I guess we don't want to waste paper. Also, I think we asked a year ago, when I wasn't paying attention to when we passed all those, the amount requested and the amount granted. Like if they're asking for 160,000 and we're giving them 22, then that would open me up to asking you questions as to why that happened. So could we in future give us the amount requested, the amount granted? Yes, we could. Now, I noticed Chris Hatch left, which tells me he already knew what he was getting for the Mississauga Food Bank. Do they all know before we approve these?
So the agencies have been informed as to what the recommendations are, but they do know that they are subject to council approval.
Wouldn't it be nicer to just give them a little surprise after we vote for them all? Well, I know it's printed last week, but.
Right. I think the issue is that we just like to give them some lead time. In some cases, it requires some significant planning. They're going to take that funding in 2018, hire staff, undertake a strategic plan, engage consultants and such. So we like to give them the lead time to let them know what's been approved.
Okay, thank you. And Malton Community Services, they got 2 drops in 2017, 102,000 and 22,500. Page 8, page 11. They're getting 92,900 this year, which is less than the other 2 put together in 2017. Is there a reason?
So what is recommended is based on the application that we receive. So we screen the application, we take a look at the outcomes, we take a look at the initiatives that organizations are trying to undertake, the sustainability of what they're planning to do. So it really just depends on what's in their application process.
So if we knew what they asked for, as I mentioned before, and what they got, then I wouldn't have to ask you that question, would I? I'd probably ask it anyway.
You would be able to see what they asked for and what they got, but you wouldn't have the details as to why they got what they got.
And you couldn't give us a 1 or 2 liner saying the programs aren't as ambitious this year, or they're not hiring any new people, which they did last year. Just a little quickie one in another column? Or is that onerous?
Well, I'm struggling to think about how I could give you the level of detail that would be useful for you without disclosing information that the agencies wouldn't want disclosed. So there are definitely within the applications requests for funding that are identifiable to a position. So I don't believe that agencies would want us to disclose information around staffing, existing staffing, potential staffing. I think there may be quite a few areas where by disclosing the information, we would put their businesses or their plans at risk.
The money they're getting is public funds. So if they don't want to tell us, they don't have to say who they're hiring and what they're doing. They could say, we're hiring one more person. We're allocating money that's public money, therefore the information we're allocating it on should also be public, should it not?
So I believe
I'm trying not to give you a
Right.
hard time,
No.
but this annoys the heck out of me. It's too simplistic. I hate asking questions when I don't even know which direction I'm going in.
So I believe at one
don't
time,
ask
we did disclose more information on the intent of the funding being provided. And then, based on council approval, we moved away from that, and the authority was delegated to myself and my staff in order to take a look at the applications, ensure there was a rigorous screening process in place, and approve allocations or recommend allocations based on what we were seeing. I do believe that if we wanted to provide more details on what the applications are, we would have to go back to the providers and ask for their approval to disclose. But I'm going to ask our regional solicitor, perhaps he could wade into that one.
I don't believe that we would need their approval to disclose information, except in the instance of personal information. If you have information that is referable to or identifiable to a specific individual by virtue of their position, that would be a problem for disclosure, and we would require consent for that kind of release of information. So that's the legal answer. There's also the relationship maintenance and their concerns about their strategic information. That's more a negotiation. Don't really require their approval on that. It is public money. But there's that consideration as well. The only legal impediment is the personal information problem.
Okay, where I'm leaning is, if we've delegated the authority to you and your staff, whom I trust implicitly, then why don't you just bring us a report that says X number was asked for, we've granted X, and we say, yes, thank you very much. We don't have anything to say with this, because this is really useless information to me. I am not making a decision on these things. So I would rather delegate the whole thing to you. You just come back with a report, say we gave out $6 million, and we used our own good judgment, and hooray, we've done it. And that would be good with me. One more question, now that I've said that. Safe City is a Mississauga organization. You funded it 83,000 last year, 90-odd thousand this year. They come to the city of Mississauga for funding as well. Brampton closed down their Safe City. So we're using Brampton dollars to fund a Mississauga organization. Why are they getting funding from both ends? Do you know that they get funding from us? Is that on their applications? And you give them this much money anyway.
That basically what Melissa is saying is we ensure that they don't double dip. So we are funding something separate.
And would you be able to tell me how much they do in their own fundraising? So that, could you, with confidence, say they also raised 90,000 or 100,000? I'd like you to, because I think this organization, I know one counselor around here has been after getting rid of it, but, and I'm not, but I would suggest from the time I was involved in it as a private citizen till now, the staff has grown hugely, and the police services are doing a lot of youth outreach. There's a lot of money being spent here, and I really would like, just call me with the numbers and we'll work on it at our end, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. But But I would be quite happy if you just brought a report, one pager that says, we gave out $6 million using our best judgment. Then I don't have to worry about it. And I trust you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. Councillor Miles.
Well, I guess I like to see the list of the organizations we're funding, so I don't know if there's a happy median between what Councillor Parrish is saying and I do think it's good for members of council to get the list, do the approval. But what I want to know is, does every organization provide an audited financial statement? Yes.
Yes, we do. Through
They
the
do.
chair, we do review their financial statements. I'm going to look to staff because I think we do a couple of years. We do at least 2 years of financial statements in order to assure ourselves that they have sustainability.
So you review their financial statements, but are they audited financial statements?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so an outside auditor would have to
Correct.
review it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess my question, and it was raised briefly before, about the United Way of Peel region. I know they are a little bit in flux right now. If it's related to the Peel Newcomer Settlement Group, why would those funds at this point not go directly to the newcomer settlement agencies? And number two, when it comes to their fundraising for the $50,000, would it be better to take a wait and see approach, how they're going to function within the new organization before we continue to dole out funds to them? I think there's a lot in flux right now, and I wouldn't want to send good money after bad until we really know how their new structure is going to operate and how those funds are going to be used, in particular how they can stay in Peel region.
So through the chair, the funding, as I mentioned, is just, the funding comes from the province and requires that there is a lead agency in which to flow that funding through to the community newcomer strategy group. So it's simply sort of a legal perspective that we have to have an umbrella organization to fund it or flow the funds through. We have had many discussions with the United Way. We strongly believe that they are committed to this work and that there will be continuity, so we don't think that the funding is at risk. We feel confident.
Okay, and are there going to be, I'll say, additional checks and balances in the next few years because of their new corporate structure?
So definitely we will continue to have a close relationship with the United Way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raz. Councillor Parrish.
Yeah, just a smart aleck comment. That's exactly what they're doing with their funding, so we can't track it. They're giving it to us. They're telling us to put it through an agency, the feds are, or the province, and we're doing that. So when we try to find out how we're being shortchanged as opposed to other areas of the country or the province, we can't. Because this money went to the United Way of Peel, and they've told you to do that. So this is a perfect example of how they break the thread, so we can't follow how we're being shortchanged. Because it'll appear as a United Way donation. I don't need an answer, just pointing it out.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish, for your investigative qualities. Not sure if
Could I
there's...
speak?
Yes.
I need to apologize. I'm sorry. I misled council. That is actually regional dollars that are flowing through the United Way because the group that it flows to is not incorporated. I'm sorry.
We're the ones who...
Well done, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a mover, Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor McFadden? All in favor? Thank you, and back to you, Chair Dale.
Thank you. Items related to enterprise programs and services, Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One item was held, item 11.4, chronic mental stress amendments under the workplace safety. Not sure who held it. Councillor Parrish? Item 11.4.
Was there a presentation that went with this? Or just a report?
Through the chair, there was just a report.
Okay. My understanding when I read this is WSIB is, and listening to just anecdotally and reading the Toronto Star, WSIB is like pulling teeth getting money out of them. Is this actually the best way to do this?
Is it?
Through to
I'm just
staff.
looking to our human resources staff to see if in fact we're having trouble getting the dollars out of WSIB.
So with respect to this legislative amendment, it is about the downloading of costs from the province to employers, right? Those claims would have potentially been through doctors, and now the employers will be covering those claims for chronic stress.
But who does the approval of the patient? Who does the approval of the person qualifying for WSIB now?
The healthcare practitioner would provide the diagnosis, and the board would approve the claim.
And it's the WSIB board?
Correct.
So anecdotally, through the Toronto Star, WSIB prides itself on not granting these. It makes it more and more difficult for people to get health coverage.
I'm not sure that I can comment on that. We do believe that the board does take a balanced approach. We do know from experience, employees at times have indicated to us that it is difficult. But it is the board's. The board is the one that approves the claims.
Can you tell me how many paramedics, for example, right now are on a WSIB?
We can get back to you with information regarding that.
Anecdotally, I was told 4.
4 currently on WSIB?
Yeah, that's not very many. Only 4 were approved in the last 6 months. Can you check that, please?
44.
Are we talking about PTSD claims particularly, or
No,
WSIB in general?
WSIB in general.
4 sounds very low, but we can get some numbers back to you.
Okay. And the last point here, the Region of Peel continues to implement a comprehensive psychological health and safety program for employees corporately and within the Paramedic Services Division of the Health Department. Can we get an update on that program? I know we had a great presentation about a year ago. I'd like to know how it's working, and I'd like to know how the paramedics themselves feel about it.
Through the chair, we'll provide that to you.
And can I get an expected time frame?
We can get that to you within the next month.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Parrish?
Nope.
There I asked.
Nope. I think I've done enough damage for one day. Yeah, I'm sorry, folks.
No problem. Would you?
I'll move it.
This is for information, so thank you. Moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor Downey. All in favor? Any opposed? Great. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All the items under Public Works have been dealt with. Brings us to other business. A motion from Councillor Fonseca regarding airport privatization of Toronto Pearson International Airport. I just wonder if we could put that on the screen.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask that. So thank you very much, Mr. Oh, am I on the board? Sorry, I wasn't off the board. Back on the board. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So before I use, I sent this notice of motion out, I guess it was last week. This was also passed at the City of Mississauga. I presented as a motion to the City of Mississauga. And just some background, at the last Federation of Canadian Municipalities board meeting, and as part of Advocacy Days, which is 2 weeks from now, FCM passed this, a very similar motion to this with regards to airports playing a very important role as a public asset within communities, and the importance of municipalities being at the table when the consultation is taking place as to how the ownership of airports across Canada may change, and also in terms of a development of an airport transportation policy that really reflects the needs of Canadians specifically within Canadian local municipalities and regions. And so that is what all the whereases reflect. So this was passed unanimously at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I will not read through every single whereas, but I just will read therefore be it resolved that the Regional Municipality of Peel call on the Government of Canada to consult with Canadian local governments and other stakeholders before making any ownership changes to Canada's airports, and to develop an air transport policy that reflects the true needs and aspirations of Canadians and Canadian communities. So just to ensure that municipal leaders, municipal elected officials are at the table in not only the discussion, but in the decision-making, and have their voice heard.
Have you a seconder? Councillor Gibson? Sorry, he had his hand up first. Any further discussion? All in favor then? A recorded vote. The motion carries.
Thank you.
So in camera matters, it's just with respect to the October 26, 2017 Regional Council closed session report. If, I don't think we need to go in. Councillor Mahoney, if you'd move that. Seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? Carried. Bylaw to confirm. Motion moved by Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor Shaughnessy, that bylaw 54-2017 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on November the 9th, 2017, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws relating thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the Regional Chair and the Regional Clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Motion moved by Councillor Carlson, seconded by Councillor Gibson, that the November 9th, 2017 Regional Council meeting be adjourned. All in favor? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I
Councillor
should have
Parrish.
asked this with the paramedics. In the report that's coming back to us, this report says that the 2017 administration fee for WSIB is 35.5% for sick leave claims, and it's going to increase by $677,000 with WSIB for next year. Could I have that addressed as well, too? I meant to ask that question and I didn't. Thank you.
All those in favor of adjournment? Carried.